They mocked the one-eyed weakling they called Cyclops, drafted into the Void Sea death game of floating islands where most challengers die on the jump. They had not seen what my missing eye could do. The Eye of Destiny sat in my scarred socket, danger glowing red, treasure glowing gold, and I read every island before it killed me. I sent home the world's first perfect upload, a giant fish that crit 50,000 times over. Yope, the one-eyed man everyone wrote off, was the only one who could see and carried a nation. Tap that like, hit subscribe, and stick around. Both keep these uploads alive, but to get to this part, I have to start from the beginning. The engines roar through the cabin, and I sit in my seat with a parachute strapped to my back and goggles pushed up on my forehead. Nearly 50 of us are packed in here, every skin tone and face different, but the fear on all of them runs exactly the same. I am nervous too, though not in a way I can't stomach, since transmigrating was already absurd enough on its own, and this is just absurdity squared. 2.5 years ago, I kicked the bucket exploring outdoors, and between one blink and the next, I woke on Blue Star wearing the body of an archaeology student with both parents alive and every connection seamless. The one fatal catch was that this world had started rotting at the root. 5 years back, the production of oil, fresh water, and food all collapsed. The wars that broke out across the globe never stopped, and Korea was the lone exception, kept solid by sustainable planning and a national habit of hoarding. Everyone lived lean, but while the foreigners had long since cinched their belts up to their throats, Korea was the only one still wearing pants. 20 days ago, the turning point came, a voice calling itself the Supreme Will rolling across Blue Star to announce that in 3 years a world-ending catastrophe would sweep the planet, and the only survival lay in joining the endgame simulation. Every country would randomly select 50 challengers and drop them into a simulated realm called the Void Sea. No land at all, only islands floating above an ocean of clouds, and any challenger who gathered resources from those floating islands and uploaded them could send them back to feed their nation's destiny. Stripped bare, it was a scavenging contest with national survival on the line. Winner takes all and the losers perish. That day the whole world fell apart, and the Korean livestream seized every television and phone at once, immune to anyone cutting the power of the internet. Korea walked in with the most confidence, our base the strongest, and then the rules dropped and every heart went cold. The first was simply that challengers would parachute into the Void Sea. How many people in all of Korea had ever touched a parachute in their lives? Acrophobia, chutes that never opened, landings chosen blind. That single step alone wiped out more than half the first batch of 50, leaving survivors you could count on 2 hands. I watched it all back then as a spectator breaking into a cold sweat at the screen, and now here I am, picked for the second batch of replacements, about to be thrown down myself. Across the Korean livestream rooms, the panic was already a fever. Every channel mocking whichever doomed soul they'd drawn, an archaeology student praying to his ancestors, an internet celebrity who danced for the monsters, the channel running Ji-gyeon and his singing in basketball. A few tried to stay hopeful, noting that the draw was random everywhere and no nation could field nothing but special forces. But the same gloom kept circling back, the foreigners falling apart at the mere word parachute, while Korea started the race a step behind. Then the Endgame Simulation's National Destiny Challenge announcement rang in every ear at once. Every country's second round of replacements was complete. Each quota filled back to 50. Each challenger had 1 chance per day to send resources home at a return rate of 100 to 10,000 times, and each country could drop 1 non-military item to one of its own challengers per round, with a message of no more than 20 characters. If a challenger's vital signs hit 0, they were truly dead, and when a country's challengers reached 0 3 times, that country was permanently disqualified from ever entering again. Disqualified. I sneered inwardly, because it was far crueler than simple erasure, which is clean, you close your eyes and it ends, while disqualification means watching your whole nation drain its resources and its order collapse. The people waiting out the longest possible despair before they die. A sneer drifted over from across the aisle, and someone called me Cyclops. I looked up. A man with a Southeast Asian face was staring at me, dark-skinned, a centipede tattooed along his neck, and he asked whether people from Korea who splattered into mud last round even deserved to come in and grab resources. The men around him laughed along with him. I didn't bite, I just held his eyes without expression, and something in that stare unnerved him, because his voice came out fierce and thin at once when he warned me that if I kept looking he'd gouge out my remaining eyeball for me. Challengers up and down the aisle turned to watch the show. I said nothing, just unbuckled my belt, stood, took 3 steps and stopped in front of him. He tried to hold his ground, demanding to know what I wanted, and reminding me the rules said attacks in the cabin caused no damage. I didn't waste a word. I raised my left hand, hooked my fingertips into the rim of my eye socket, and under the horror of every watching face pried the still warm glass bead straight out, the empty socket left behind eerie and sinister. I held the fake eyeball out to him, tilted my head, and asked if he wanted it, said I'd give it to him. His face went corpse pale and he shrank as far back into his seat as he could, a few of the timid ones gasping and whipping their heads away. I stared at him for 10 full seconds, until he didn't dare so much as breathe, then curled my lip, turned, and walked back to my seat. I pushed the glass bead home, pressed it, and blinked. A perfect fit. then leaned back, vaguely annoyed. Every other transmigrator out there gets a system or a superpower and launches straight into the stratosphere, while my own soul transmigration handed me a secondhand body that wasn't even 80% new. Missing original factory parts, my daily entertainment nothing but fiddling with a glass bead. In the Korean livestream, the room detonated the moment that scene played, half calling me a ruthless lunatic and half wailing that a one-eyed man was a free kill the instant he landed. Then a flood of overseas handles poured in, foreign feeds laughing that Korea must have nobody left if it was picking cripples, and that we should start preparing the funerals, one even bragging in Korean that he'd emigrated early enough to dodge being killed by a blind man like me. The mockery lit the Korean crowd's temper, and they fired back that a one-eyed man would outlive any two-eyed freak among them. I knew none of that, of course. I leaned back and ran the calculations in my head, weighing whether the first move after landing should be water, cover, or reading the terrain. Then a soft chime rang inside my skull and I blinked, because I knew that seductive notification sound better than anything, having waited for it in my dreams every night for 2.5 years. By the usual script, what came next should be a grand, emotionless mechanical voice, the system arriving at last, the protagonist ascending to the summit of his life. Instead, a sweet female voice introduced herself as the Earth Korea Transmigrator Management Bureau. At my service, my dedicated customer service representative, employee identification 996007. It caught me completely off guard, and something felt wrong, as if they ran this with formal corporate operations now too. The voice pressed on, reporting that it had detected transmigrator user Im Yop suffering significant malicious discrimination from the indigenous population, that my legal rights had been severely infringed, and that under Chapter 3, Article 17 of the Korean Transmigrator Rights Protection Manual, it had urgently activated the cross-border care plan on my behalf. A pattern of golden light flared to life inside my left eye. I sat there dazed, wondering whether I was doing so badly that someone upstairs couldn't bear to watch, and had come down to run a poverty relief drive, and thinking that if I'd known a trigger clause like this existed, I'd have gouged out the other eye the day I arrived. A Transmigrator Management Bureau, I muttered. Does Korea really run a department this unhinged? Is it even registered with anybody? Because a law-abiding citizen can't go using shady goods of unknown origin. And has Transmigration Management really gotten competitive enough to assign that overworked corporate slave a one-on-one client? Before I could finish the thought, the voice returned and rattled off its work in clip below reports, that it was monitoring the high-dimensional consciousness in my world, cracking permissions, fully cracked, matching a suitable item, match complete, item number 99. Eye of Destiny, beginning injection. The next second, a warm current surged out of my left socket, and the glass prosthetic began reshaping under some invisible force, an indescribable swelling pushing outward until I clapped my hand over the eye in alarm. Half convinced this supposed benefit was about to launch straight out of my head. It didn't hurt exactly, and after about 10 seconds the voice reported injection complete. The heat draining away, the socket quiet as if nothing had happened. I kept my hand clamped over it anyway, because with dozens of people in this cabin, a holy laser firing out now would be a problem. I called out to the customer service lady in my mind, half joking, asking whether a 5-star review earned a cash rebate or maybe some actual gifts. She answered only that the previous user had left an attached message for me to review, wished me great martial success, and vanished. Then my consciousness dipped, and a sheet of golden paper formed in my mind out of nowhere, written in arrogant, wild Korean cursive. The note opened with a lazy greeting, calling me a junior from back home, explaining this eyeball was a leftover from the writer's playing days, donated to the Bureau for Poverty Relief, so I shouldn't look down on it. As for its powers, he said to stop at red and go at green, and on gold I surely knew about the golden legend, and if I ever saw gray spots it meant high-dimensional energy had invaded my area. He warned that with a plain human body I could only run the eye 3 minutes a day before I was finished, told me not to whine but to squeeze every second out of myself, and that if I wanted to last longer I should figure it out and develop the eye, since it had many uses. Survive first, then grow strong, he closed. And don't let some minor trouble on my home planet scare me witless, signing it with a ridiculous handle about the dreams of 10 million maidens, and a note that if we ever met he'd take me to play with some top-tier high-dimensional big swords. I sat silent for a long while after the paper dissolved, deciding this counted as landing a government post even if the whole thing sounded wildly unreliable. A 3-minute reel man squeezing out every second, hardly the words of a decent person. And that bit about the big swords. Dream. I'm taking you at your word. You better keep it. I parted my left hand a crack and froze. I could see the left side, the grain of the armrest, the side profile of the man beside me, the rivets in the cabin wall, all crisp and whole. For 2.5 years I'd lived with that darkness on my left, turning my head an extra half circle at every crosswalk. And now my eye was back, and whatever else the Eye of Destiny could do, simply returning my sight was already worth a 5-star review. I was about to start studying it when my wrist tightened. A dark electronic bracelet had locked itself onto my left wrist, the time glowing in its center, 13 hours and 12 minutes. It was fused to my skin. I tugged and it didn't shift, and all around the cabin everyone else was wrenching at their own to no effect. The National Destiny Challenge spoke at the same moment, announcing that all challengers had been assigned and upload terminals distributed, that the upload limit was a single independent item within 1 cubic meter, and that the terminal handled material uploads only with no storage function. As the voice finished, a translucent National Destiny screen bloomed in front of my right eye. I scanned the cabin and saw no one else look up, every head fixed forward, so the thing was visible only to its owner, and only to my right eye at that. My panel read out my name as Im Yop, my nationality as Korea, my vital signs as incomplete, my pollution at 0% for physical health, and my spirit grid at 100% for mental health. Pollution for the body and spirit grid for the mind. Both of them obvious traps. Then my eye snagged on that single word, incomplete. My left eye saw the floor's color and texture perfectly, my field of vision whole, yet the National Destiny screen, the voice of the Supreme Will itself, still judged me incomplete, as if it didn't even know what had happened to this eye. Then the dream Big Shot's rank might outstrip the Supreme Will. And of course it did. Your elder is always your elder, and my Korea is the best. In the 99th high-dimensional zone, inside a golden magnificent space, a young handsome man lounged on a throne with 2 stunning exotic goddesses tending him at either side. A message surfaced on the terminal in his hand, and with a mischievous grin he tapped out a reply, telling someone he called Sister 13 that he'd sent that eyeball out at last, that their craft finally had an heir. The answer came instantly, congratulating him that now at least someone would wear mourning clothes for him someday, and he could only beg her to have a proper conversation for once. Back on Blue Star, the backup challenger rosters from every country synced across all the broadcast rooms at once. The Korean feeds counted how few soldiers Korea had drawn, wondered aloud whether any of these people had wilderness experience, circled the one-eyed guy again, snapped at each other for going quiet about that very man right after he gouged his eyeball out, and kept fretting that this batch of reserves felt dangerously thin. Then the official host of the livestream, So Chungran, spoke, reminding the viewers that not one of the first batch's survivors had been favored at the start, that no one was born holding a winning script, and that the ones who survived leaned on precise judgment and the will to crush every obstacle for Korea. The chosen were the backbone of the nation, she said, and whatever their physical condition or their starting hand, no one had the right to write their obituary before the results came in. The feed went silent for 2 full seconds, then erupted, voices begging the camera to swing to Brother Eyegouger and swearing at him to survive. Inside the cabin, the white lighting flipped to dark red. 3 short buzzes marked the jump signal, and the rear door ground open as the ramp lowered. I remembered from the broadcast how many people froze on that ramp and got ejected by force once the plane had flown far enough, ending in heavy casualties, which was exactly why a challenger had to jump on his own. One after another, they rushed the ramp and threw themselves into the clouds below. I started forward, and as luck had it, the tattooed man rose at the same moment and shot me a venomous glare, promising we'd settle accounts the instant we landed. Yet at the lip of the ramp, his legs shook beyond control, every ounce of his swagger gone to cowardice. I swayed up behind him, every eye in the cabin fixed on us, the viewers in my broadcast room holding their breath, and quietly raised my right leg, tensed and kicked him square in the backside. He sailed out of the cabin with a scream and vanished into the cloud sea. I turned at the edge of the ramp and swept the dumbstruck crowd, telling them the rules only said attacks caused no damage, never that they wouldn't generate kinetic energy. Then I pulled the goggles down, wished everyone a safe trip, leaned back, spread my arms, and dropped gracefully into the sea of clouds. In the Korean livestream, the aftershock of that kick spread wildly, the crowd howling that it had launched them off the toilet, and crowning my reading comprehension perfect, since the rules never forbade kicking. The joy ran short as overseas handles flooded back, foreign feeds branding it a sneak attack, calling a kick from 4,000 meters no different from murder, even demanding new rules to sanction the malice. And the Korean section exploded right back that no damage was done. This was pure Newtonian displacement. Go learn some physics. So Chungran caught a lull and asked Jin Gukbong for his read on what I'd done. Jin Gukbong was a retired veteran and tactics expert in his 40s, buzz-cut and dark-skinned, and he didn't bother hiding his approval. He declared it well done, that since I'd taken no penalty the rules plainly allowed it, that it even counted as a good deed since I'd helped the man conquer his fear of heights, and that had it been him up there, he'd have flipped the man around and kicked him out face first. The host laughed that his perspective ran on another level entirely, and the crowd christened the whole thing charity skydiving. In the open air of the void sea, I held my arms wide, body locked in an X, the cold biting as the clouds tore past. Across my right eye's retina, a string of blue numbers ticked my altitude downward. 3,700 meters, then 3,622. I punched through the last layer of cloud and the world opened up beneath me, floating islands of every size hanging suspended in the air. At the cluster's edge, the small ones ran about village-sized, level 1 islands by the official classification, while the ones riding a little higher were several times larger, level 2, and higher still, behind the clouds, I could just make out shapes far bigger, level 3, level 4, or beyond. I hesitated a second, then triggered the Eye of Destiny. The world in my left eye changed. The islands below took on shifting shades of green, scattered through with sparse red dots, and when I swept the level 2 island I'd marked earlier, a faint, small golden point sat on it. A golden legend, good stuff though, around the gold many red dots clustered thick. The instant I tried to look closer, a sharp pain stabbed my left eye. The eye of destiny slammed shut on its own, and my whole body went hollow and drained. I shook uncontrollably and nearly flipped in the airflow before I wrestled my posture back and barely steadied. 2 seconds, that was it. Big brother. So much for the promised 3 minutes. A real man indeed, bumped straight up to millisecond warrior. Then it clicked. My cheat wasn't weak. I'd just been arrogant, running a full panoramic scan across the level 2 island 10 kilometers off, in a single instant, and long-range reconnaissance plainly multiplied the drain enormously. Even so, that glimpse left a residue. Gold meant something extraordinary, so that island had to hold good things, but the expert's line about stopping at red and going at green marked danger from safety, and the gold ringed in red meant walking there now would be serving myself up on a plate. Land on a level 1 island first, because only the living earn the right to covet anything. The numbers fell on 1,227 meters, 1,054. I yanked the ripcord, the parachute snapped open and jerked me upward, my descent dragging to a slower crawl, and I hauled clumsily at the cords and glided toward the level 1 island, a flat stretch off to the left mottled with dwarf grass and gravel, its edge dropping into the island's cliff. 50 meters, 20, then my feet hit the ground and I stumbled forward more than 10 meters before tucking into a rolling fall and coming to rest in a thoroughly sorry state. The parachute broke into motes of light and dissolved, the pack on my back becoming an ordinary dark backpack, and I slumped down, lungs heaving. I'd made it down alive, but among this batch of Korean reserves, how many others would ever stand on solid ground again? In the Korean livestream they chanted that I'd landed. The brother eye gouger was incredible, confessing their hearts had nearly stopped at that mid-air wobble, tallying another successful landing for Korea. So Cheongran announced I'd come down safely on a level 1 island, then asked teacher Seo for his survival read. Seo Myung-won said landing was good, but the real test had only just begun. That level 1 islands were resource poor, and given my physical condition he'd advised me to find my compatriots fast. He said it gently, and everyone understood. The viewers snapped at him for pouring cold water the second I'd touched ground, but he didn't answer. He lowered his eyes to the tablet and reported the director's latest figures. That this round Korea had sent 42 reserves and only 24 had landed. His voice shook. 18 compatriots, he said, hadn't made it through the skydiving phase, and the feed went quiet as So Chung-bran stood and asked everyone to share a moment of silence for the 18, who, whatever the outcome, had all given themselves for Korea. On Blue Star, in Korea, inside the command center of the Disaster Prevention Administration, the giant screen carried every Korean challenger's broadcast at once. Commander-in-Chief Director Wai Chul-jin, early 50s burly and upright, took a staff member's salute and the report that of the 42 who entered, 24 had landed and 18 were confirmed lost. He shut his eyes, his fists clenching on their own, said they had sacrificed for Korea, and ordered the pension work begun at once by the standards for martyrs. Fast and stable, not a single name missed. Then he asked who was making the fastest progress, and was told the 8 survivors of the first batch had all reached level 2 islands, the fastest being the former Southern Theater Soldier King Seo Hae-bong, just boarded onto a level 3 island and hunting a stronghold. As for the other countries, the United States led with 6 already on level 3 islands, Russia close behind with 5. He said nothing more, his gaze drifting slowly across the screen. On the level 1 island, I opened my backpack and took stock. A self-defense dagger with a keen blade, a small folding iron pot, a flint, a compressed sleeping bag, and a pair of grappling hooks on a 10-meter rope. It was a standard kit built on the principle that you'll starve if you're hungry and won't live well either way. I tucked the dagger into my belt, hung the hooks on the side of the pack, stuffed the rest back in, and stood to go learn this environment and find shelter, ideally near water. I'd barely taken the first step when the National Destiny Challenge broadcast something new. The second batch of replacement challengers had been deployed, it said, and the adaptation period was over, which stunned me, because that brutal opening had apparently been nothing but the beginner tutorial. The voice gave nobody time to digest it. Starting today, it announced, the Void Sea would randomly trigger regional natural disasters, and it was adding vassal rules in step. Any challenger at his wit's end could file a vassal application to a challenger from another country, after which all his earnings would be forcibly fed back to the master's nation, and his own nationality converted to the master's. Ants, it said, stay awake, don't be swallowed by greed. Now go fight for that pitiful spark for your country. I sat back down and dragged the dagger's tip through the dirt, because that rule was a clean psychological strike. On the surface, an escape hatch. Underneath it made betrayal legitimate, kneeling to be someone else's dog, built to sow chaos between Blue Star's nations. The ones it truly delighted were the bootlickers back home, who'd always dreamed of emigrating but lacked the money or skills to earn a glance, because the Supreme Will had just opened them a fast lane. Get selected, land safely, kneel before some foreign overlord, and citizenship was yours. Agency fees included. It's genuinely disgusting, I thought, and stood and brushed the dust off my hands. The Korean livestream churned over the same revulsion, asking whether any human could have written a rule that forced people into treason. A few naive voices insisted nobody at the level of a national destiny contest would stoop to use it, and the rest snapped back that people were probably burning incense right now, praying to be drafted next batch just for the chance. Sure enough, the overseas handles flooded into gloat, cooing for Korea's challengers to come over for guaranteed treatment and betting Korea would have someone vassalize within 3 days. The Korean section turned instantly to a battlefield, jeering whether they'd eaten too much kimchi and gone delusional with their own treasuries empty, asking whichever knee a certain island nation would drop first the moment its foreign daddy ordered it to kneel, and once that landed, the island handles went silent. Then someone dredged up the foreign challenger who'd earlier sent home, of all things, a fistful of leaves for a 5,000 times return, joking the air over there must reek of them now, until that handle could only curse and curse again to no effect. Jin Gukbong laughed at the smell of leaves line, then turned serious, saying people with real backbone won't kneel, and the ones who would were always going to betray the country some other way, rule or no rule, so this just filters the trash out for us. So Chongran took it up without a seam, saying she trusted every selected countryman knew what he carried on his shoulders. And as for the foreign feeds trying to recruit, her words sharp, that their own countries couldn't even feed their people, so they needn't trouble themselves worrying about us. The comment section drowned in praise for the host's domineering air. This level 1 island was even more barren than I'd pictured. In 15 minutes I crossed it end to end, nothing but gravel, short grass, shrubs, and that snarl of chaotic stone forest piled in the middle. Not even a decent puddle of water anywhere. My lips were already peeling, the airdrop and the hiking having run me dry. As I walked, I tested the Eye of Destiny, narrowing my left eye on a clump of weeds 3 meters off, and opening the ability, a faint green washing over their outline before I shut it, the whole thing under a second and costing almost no fatigue. Close-range observation drained on a completely different scale from long-range. I ran it several more times, open and shut in a single second, smooth as an ordinary person winking. The nearer the distance and the smaller the area, the lower the cost. The dream big shots 3 minutes were never about holding the eye open straight through. They meant breaking the time into pieces and spending each second where it counted. A real man measured not by how long he lasts, but by how every stroke lands with precision. Fine. Out of context, that still comes out wrong. I also learned the colors carried grades, most weeds wearing only a thin film of pale green, while the rare one glowed far brighter, the depth of shade marking intensity and value. Through steady experiment, I came to understand my new left eye well enough that my odds of surviving here had climbed by a good deal. I walked on, and after another 10 minutes, found a row of vines spilling down the cliff on the island's north face, fruit a little bigger than a fist dangling off the edge, shells rough and gray-green and round, very much like coconuts. My attention settled on them and a line of text popped up before my right eye on its own. Cloudberry. This national destiny system was a devotee of minimalism, not even bothering to say whether the thing was edible. I lay at the cliff's lip and leaned out over the bottomless white of the cloud sea, caught the nearest vine, and with a little force reeled in 2 fruits together. I backed off to safe ground, drove the dagger's tip into the shell, and pried, and the gray-green husk cracked open on clear juice, breathing out a sweet scent that sharpened my thirst tenfold. I leaned in to drink and my hand stopped cold. For safety, I swept it fast with the Eye of Destiny, and the juice lay under a faint green threaded all through with fine scattered gray spots. My brows drew tight. Gray spots, the filthy high-dimensional energy the dream big shot had warned me about 1,000 times, and whatever reaction it caused, I'd bet the pollution value on my screen tied straight back to it. I flung the cloudberry down and the juice splashed everywhere. In the Korean livestream, So Myung-won nearly came out of his chair, baffled that I'd throw the fruit away when I plainly needed water and the first batch had eaten it with no trouble, while Jin Gukbong wondered whether I just found it unpalatable. The foreign feeds sneered that Korea's pick couldn't even drink water and that the cripple lacked the sense to tell food apart, and the Korean section churned with worry, viewers begging Brother Eye Gouger to wake up. That's water. Some swearing they'd go watch the Soldier King Seo Haebong instead, to spare themselves the rage. On screen, I pried open the second, my left eye blinking lightning fast, and threw that one down too, Seo Myung-won's mouth falling open and staying that way. I reeled in every vine within reach, pried open each fruit, and swept it fast with my left eye, throwing one away, then another, until the 9th, where my hand stopped because the juice on my left retina read as clean, light green, no gray spots. I pulled in another vine and picked 1 clean fruit out of its 4, 2 clean out of 13, not bad at all. Then lifted the first, tilted my head back, and took a long pull, the clear sweet juice sliding down my parched throat. The camera zoomed in, and the fruits scattered on the ground, and the one in my hand looked identical to the naked eye. Seo Myung-won stared at the screen, sweat beading on his forehead, asking what I could possibly be sorting by. On Blue Star in Korea, in the 3rd research group under the Disaster Prevention Administration, Yuk-jin sat behind 3 screens, one carrying my broadcast, his eyes locked on the heap of cloudberry husks. In his early 30s, holding doctorates in high-dimensional physics, anomalous biology, and behavioral psychology, he'd wanted to quit since his first day on the transfer, asked to watch people scavenge the wilderness and write up observation reports. He was wild with curiosity about that world, the supreme will, what held the floating islands against gravity, the gravitational model of the void sea, any one of which could swallow 10 years of study, but a thing he could see and never touch had only ever bored him. Until now. He scrubbed the feedback frame by frame, then laid close-up screenshots of all 13 across the next screen, where by naked eye or analysis software the color, texture, and clarity of the juice showed no difference at all. He took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, murmuring that it wasn't taste, smell, or touch, his fingers tapping the desk, because at no more than a second from prying open to judgment, any method leaning on deep sensory input was ruled out, leaving only one possibility: vision. He zoomed in on my face, where every time I cracked a fruit my left eye blinked impossibly fast, too fast for ordinary viewers to catch. But Yukchin caught it. He knew the left eye was a prosthetic, yet his instinct told him that eyeball held a secret. Interesting. On the level 1 island, I shivered without meaning to. The temperature had dropped, and with no wind either. I packed the empty husks away, the flesh thick enough to save for dinner, and looked up to find the sky already dark. I needed somewhere to spend the night, and I remembered the stone forest dead in the island's center. Several giant boulders stacked at random into half-enclosed gaps. Not great, but better than the open. I'd gathered a fair number of branches on the way, every size, and my arms were full by the time I reached its edge. The place was bigger up close than from a distance. I circled it until, on the north side, 3 giant boulders formed an irregular concave hollow, the floor dry, a slanted boulder leaning overhead as a roof. This would do. I set my pack at the deepest point against the rock wall, then crouched and got to work, foraging 2 large armfuls of dry leaves and withered grass. I worked a handful of dead grass between my palms until it broke into a loose powder and mounted it into a fist-sized ball. Then I braced the flint against it, tilted the dagger's edge to 45 degrees, and scraped fast, the sparks catching nothing on the first try, and on the second raising a thread of white smoke and an orange-red ember. I bent low and breathed gently, careful not to rush it. Too hard and it guttered, too soft and it starved, until the ember spread and I covered it with dry leaves and coaxed the flame up. I fed it thin branches, then thicker ones. In 10 minutes on a campfire was crackling, the firelight throwing a warm orange across the 3 rock walls. I pulled the sleeping bag from my pack and spread it at the back of the hollow, then sat cross-legged in the campfire's heat and fished out the cloudberry husk, a thick layer of flesh still clinging inside to scrape off and eat. I laid the dagger against the edge of the flesh and paused, stared at it for 2 seconds, then set the husk down and drew out the last intact cloudberry instead. Screw it, I thought, tossing the fruit in my hand. Let me hand in today's supplies first, because back home, there had to be people more anxious than I was. In the Korean livestream, the scrolling comments suddenly slowed. Viewers stunned that I hadn't even eaten and was already uploading with only one left, begging Brother Eyegouger to eat his fill, asking how much the thing could even be worth, somebody muttering about who'd started cutting onions. On the feed, I set the cloudberry on open ground and pressed the terminal on my left wrist, and a translucent blue cube of light a cubic meter across, projected out to swallow the lone fruit. A prompt surfacing on my right eye screen. Target material detected. Cloudberry, 1 unit. Confirm upload. Upload, I said, and the frame contracted, the cloudberry dissolving into points of light. Right after, the voice of the National Destiny Challenge rang out across all of Blue Star at once, announcing that Korean challenger Im Yop had successfully uploaded material, detecting material cloudberry, quality perfect. I froze. Perfect. Back when I watched the broadcast, the first batch had uploaded plenty, most coming back standard. The single best one only excellent. So what tier was perfect? Before I could collect myself, the broadcast fired again, announcing a triggered 10,000 times critical hit. And I swallowed hard, 10,000 times that would be. Then the voice rolled on that owing to the first ever appearance of perfect quality material, the critical multiplier had climbed, triggering a 100,000 times critical hit, and that the material would drop into Korea's official dedicated warehouse. The instant the news broke, the whole world froze. In Korea, in the plaza of the dedicated warehouse for National Destiny Resources, a logistics staffer named Old Joe dropped his enamel cup to shatter as countless cloudberries poured out of the air into a small mountain. His legs shook as he grabbed his walkie-talkie and reported, voice breaking, that the plaza was completely buried. Over in the Korean live stream, the viewers flooded back by the 1,000, screaming about 100,000 times critical hit on one single fruit, in the world's first perfect quality. They demanded to know what kind of deity Brother Eyegouger was, swore through tears that the kid hadn't even eaten, and called out whoever had branded me a waste to stand up now. This time, the Korean handles were the ones counterattacking abroad, answering the rivals whose strongest challenger had only hit excellent that they simply didn't deserve it, and brushing off the cries of cheating and disbelief with the reminder that I'd picked one clean fruit out of 13. until the foreign feeds dissolved into cursing again. Jin Gukbong slapped the table hard enough to bounce the microphone, crowing that it was beautifully done and asking whether those jealous foreigners' eyes even worked, while Seo Myungwon, happy but genuinely lost, couldn't grasp why an item that had topped out at excellent came back perfect for me. So Chomgran rose, congratulating me on the world's first perfect quality feedback record for Korea, 100,000 times critical hit, not just a resupply but a ringing slap across every doubter's face. As the comments filled with flags, I sat in front of the campfire, my mind still hazy. One cloudberry, 100,000 times critical hit at perfect quality, 100,000 sent home to Korea, and I could all but conclude it tied entirely to whether the fruit carried gray spots. Before I could finish working it through, a voice surfaced alone in my ears, congratulating Challenger M. Yop as the first ever to provide perfect quality material feedback. Awarding the special achievement A Perfect Beginning, reward dropped. Something thudded down out of the sky beside the campfire in front of me. The dagger in my hand was still frozen in the position of scraping the fruit flesh, and the firelight played across the wooden box, flickering on and on. The wooden box is plain, no markings, just grain. I reach for the lid, and the upload broadcast cuts in again, announcing that a Japanese challenger named Matsushita Teruko has uploaded a cloudberry, quality flawed, triggering a 500 times critical hit. I pull my hand back and brush the dust off my knees. 500 times against my 100,000, the same fruit, a 200-fold gap, and I can already hear what that does to a room. It does exactly what I think it does. Korea's live stream roaring about a dimensional reduction strike and needling the Japanese feed until it plays dead. Not long after, an American named William Davis uploads a dream hemp leaf at good quality for a 9,900 times hit. One short of the cap, and the Korean crowd loses it that the United States took global runner-up with a leaf again. Jin Gukbong fights down a laugh, reminding himself a military man cannot lead the mockery of an allied nation, while So Chongran steers it back to the rest. Then an Indian challenger named Gupta uploads a rock-spined lizard marked injured for 1,000 times hit, and the comment wall turns strange and giddy as half the room empties out to go observe enemy intelligence. Seo Myungwon turns to find Jin Gukbong already scrolling his phone, claiming the kids might gather bad intelligence, and that he, after all, is a professional. And so Chungran turns away with her shoulders shaking. Over the next stretch, the broadcasts rise and fall, other Korean challengers handing in standard and flawed resources for a few hundred to a couple thousand times. Nothing remarkable. When they end, the world is left with one absurd fact, that apart from my perfect 100,000, the global runner-up in quality and multiplier is a leaf from the United States. Back at my campfire, I scrape the last of the pulp from the shell and chew it down. Not full, but not empty either. Then rub my hands and lift the box and open the lid. The firelight pours in over a matte black metal bracer at the bottom, long enough to sheath my forearm. Lined inside with fine fabric, a firing port at the top of its golden outer shell with a 3-clawed grappling hook seated in it. The panel surfaces in my right eye and reads it out for me. A wind-chasing claw, special forearm equipment, a built-in high-strength fiber cable, 100 meters long with one-button rapid retraction. The hook guided in flight by weak air currents for a little more accuracy and stability. I lift it out and turn it over, lighter than I expected, the metal cold and hard under my thumb. This is 10 times the junk grappling hook in my standard kit. The crowd sees an island exploration tool, but I see something else entirely. 100-meter range and rapid retraction means I can anchor it to a cliff or to an object, or hook a high point and rip myself out of a dying spot, attack on the way in or retreat on the way out. Not an exploration toy. A god-tier item for a player who fights dirty and runs first. I slide it onto my right forearm and the lining clings to my skin. A perfect fit, and a turn of my wrist tells me it won't hinder a single movement. The starter hook goes to the side of my pack as a backup. Then I start the night's last preparations, feeding a few thick branches into the campfire until the flames climb and light up all 3 rock walls around me. I crossed this island today and saw no sign of anything large, but not seeing a thing is not the same as it not being here, and in this world no amount of caution is too much. I crouch and rake the wood ash out of the campfire's base, then scoop a handful and trace a continuous circle along the open mouth of the U-shaped hollow the 3 boulders make. 2 fingers wide, no breaks. The alkalinity will sting small reptiles and insects and turn them away on instinct. And whether the bugs of the Void Sea respect that or not, it beats doing nothing. Then I crawl into the sleeping bag with the dagger held close along the edge, my back to the warm rock, the fire crackling 2 meters off, and the wire that's been pulled tight in me all day finally slackens a little as I watch the shadows dance. Mom must be sick with worry right now. 2.5 years here, and the mother of this world has been impossibly good to me. The first sense of belonging I ever had. Tucking a pack of tissues into my left pocket before I leave. Setting the dishes on my right side when she washes them. Arranging the whole apartment around my right eye's field of view. As for my cheapskate father, never mind. I've laid eyes on him exactly once in those 2.5 years. And even the original owner's memory of him is a single word. Distant. None of it changes the plan. I live, and then I scour this rotted world clean to stretch out my family's years and Korea's years with them, and the firelight blurs as I close my eyes and let my breathing go long and even. In a research wing back on Blue Star, Yukjin sits with two screenshots side by side. My perfect cloudberry on the left, Japan's flawed one on the right. He has run Korea's best analysis software across them frame by frame. Hue saturation, texture, the juice's refractive index, and every quantifiable visual parameter sits inside the normal range of plant-to-plant variation. He takes off his glasses, pinches the bridge of his nose, and writes 2 lines on a scrap of paper, that they are the same species in the same environment with no macroscopic visual difference, yet the quality verdicts are worlds apart. The pen hovers, then he adds a 3rd line that I saw something he and his instruments cannot. He drains his cold coffee, opens a fresh encrypted file titled with my name and the words "Left Eye Hypothesis," and watches the cursor blink on the empty page. Daybreak. I open my eyes with the dagger already laid flat across my chest, and the camp is quiet, the fire down to dark red embers trailing thin smoke. I sit up, my spine creaking from a night against stone, and look to the ash ring. The line held, unscattered by wind, but a few small blackish things sit at its edge. I lean in, 3 bugs each, 2 fingers long and entirely gray-black, limbs curled, dead as a doornail. No matter the world, bugs fear physical strong alkali, and the corner of my mouth twitches at the proof. The viewers who camped on their screens all night get a collective chill at 3 dead bugs, marveling that there really are bugs here, and what would have happened without that ash. And Seo Myungwon notes dryly that in the wild it's the small inconspicuous things that kill you, not the big beasts. Jin Gukbong yawns and tells him that if he'd said as much yesterday, he wouldn't be sitting here as an armchair critic today, and the comment wall fills with laughter. My stomach is growling, last night's scrap of pulp long gone, so I pack the sleeping bag and head for the North Cliff. The vines where I picked yesterday are stripped bare, so I follow the edge east for a few minutes until another row of thick vines hangs down bearing a cluster of gray-green cloudberries. I know the rhythm now. I lie at the lip, haul the nearest vine up, and pry the first one, gray spots, toss the second the same, toss the third clean light green, with no impurities, lucky. I set it beside me and reach for the vine again to pick a few more, and my hand has barely touched it when a sharp screech tears down out of the sky. I drop flat and press to the ground, dagger reversed in my grip, breath slowed almost to nothing as the screech sweeps closer. Turning my face up by inches, I narrow my eyes at the sky, and a giant gray-brown bird of prey cuts past the cloud edge, a wingspan near 4 meters, forked tail, wings sheathed in rock-textured feathers. The panel names it for me, a rock feather kite. I go motionless. It doesn't linger over the island, but dives straight for the base of the cliff, and after a dozen seconds with no second one in sight, I crawl forward and ease a sliver of my body out over the edge. 30 or 40 meters down, a horizontal crevice has split the cliff face, packed with dead branches and mud into a bowl-shaped nest, and the rock feather kite squats in it with its head bowed, tidying. Beside it, a few gray-white eggs lie exposed, and my throat works on its own at real solid protein. Cloudberries only refill water, and a little sugar, the pulp barely a base, but an egg that size would put my stamina back, and my eye of destiny already swept it a moment ago. Green, safe, edible. The trouble is the 30 or 40 meters of drop and the big bird sitting right next to the prize. The livestream begs me to be rational and not get reckless. Seo Myungwon frowns that a direct fight with a large flying creature gives me an extremely low survival rate in my state, and with my vision's defect on top of it, his advice is to pull back now and breed no unnecessary greed. Jin Gukbong says nothing and only stares, because on the feed I neither climb down nor retreat. I just lie at the edge, motionless. 10 minutes. 15. The bird stays put. I'm not impatient. The longer it sits, the more patience it asks. A few more minutes, and the rock feather kite finally moves, dipping its head to peck lightly at the eggs, then spreading its wings and lifting off toward the distant clouds, smaller and smaller until it's gone. Now, I roll over, spring up, and stretch my right arm out over the cliff, the wind-chasing claw's port aimed down at the nest. I hold my breath and press the switch, and the 3-clawed hook fires out trailing its cable, drops into the nest, and locks its tips around a single egg with a crisp catch. I press again. The cable hums and reels back at high speed, dragging the egg up and over the edge, and I scoop it out of the air with my left hand where it lands steady in my palm. Got it. Bigger than my fist and heavy. I grabbed the clean cloudberry I'd picked and turned to run. No looking back, no hesitation, because I don't know that kite's hunting range, and I'm not gambling on how long it takes to come home. I sprint all the way to the stone forest. The live stream is one solid cheer, calling it one shot, one kill, a pure technical egg steal, the wind-chasing claw cracking jokes about its debut, the crowd waving Seo Myungwon's nose in it. He opens his mouth, holds it a long moment, and manages to squeeze out that this counts as a tactical evasion, and Jin Gukbong laughs and slaps his shoulder. That evasion my foot. This is raiding the nest. Strike when the enemy is weak. Beautiful work. So Chongren lands it cleanly, that I used yesterday's reward to take an egg from range, and that sometimes the smartest fight is the one you don't have, the comment wall crowning the whole thing. Back at camp, I crouch by last night's fire and rake the embers aside, the charcoal underneath still holding heat, then bury the egg in hot ash and fine charcoal. It isn't enough, so I strike the flint into a fresh handful of dried grass, feed thin firewood on, and let the heat work in from the outside while I pry the clean cloudberry and sip its juice. 15 minutes, and I roll the egg out of the fire with a branch, the shell steaming and gray with ash. I tap it with the spine of my dagger, and it cracks, steam hissing out, and I flinch and pry the shell off in pieces. The white has set to a porcelain white with charred yellow edges, and it smells so good I'd bite in without waiting. The texture is far firmer than a chicken egg, chewy, better the more I chew, the yolk sandy and dense without choking my throat, and I chase it with another mouthful of cloudberry juice. My stomach finally sits heavy and solid. I'm about to finish the rest when the National Destiny Challenge descends in everyone's ears with yesterday's battle report. Across all countries, challenger deaths yesterday came to 1,469, Korea 21, the United States 13, Russia 11, Japan 17, Saudi Arabia 33, the list scrolling country by country, every row a column of real lives. Then the cause breakdown lands. Parachute failure at 47%, environmental factors like poisoning and hypothermia and falling off a cliff at 31, beast attack at 18, challenger conflict at 4. That last figure hangs there glaring. I'm stunned for a second, then calm, because I've always known the worst threat doesn't come from outside. Our own kind is the most dangerous thing here. Back in his home city, in front of the living room television, Lee Mi is curled on the sofa with her eyes ringed red, where she stayed since she learned yesterday her son was selected. She watched the skydive with her knuckles white on the remote, and hasn't shut her eyes all night. And only now, seeing her son cram the roasted egg into his mouth, does she let out a breath and tell him to eat slowly, that no one is going to snatch it from him. As long as he's alive, as long as he's eating. Then the doorbell rings, and she opens it on two young people in uniform, a man and a woman, name tags reading Disaster Prevention Administration, Task Force, who snap to attention and salute and tell her they've come under orders to visit the family of Comrade Im Yop. She steps aside in a fluster and waves them in out of the cold. Their eyes sweep the living room, clean and orderly, the furniture old but kept perfectly, the television still running her son's feed. She rubs her hands, a little embarrassed, and says it's only her at home, that her husband is stationed in the West and rarely comes back. The young man asks gently whether the family has any difficulties, and she waves both hands at once, that she has more than enough, that everything is fine, that the country is having a hard time, and they should leave these things for the front lines, or for families who need them more. The young woman steps up and says softly that Comrade Im Yop uploaded the world's first perfect quality resource for Korea yesterday, not just a resource but a thing that lifted the whole nation's morale, that he is a national hero. The country will not let its heroes bleed and weep and then let their families go cold, she says, because caring for the families of heroes is their duty. Footsteps follow in the hall as logistics staff carry in boxes and stack them along the wall. Rice, flour, grain, oil, canned goods, drinking water, medicine. They salute again, telling her that her son is bringing Korea glory in the Void Sea and that she must look after her own health, that she need only contact the community and they'll come at once, then turn and go. She stands at the door watching them leave, looks down at the boxes, and her eyes go red again. In the command center, Wai Chil-jun pushes the door open smelling of smoke after a night at the central hub, and Ju Gyeonpyeong, head of the intelligence division, meets him with yesterday's casualty and upload figures and the intelligence reports, then lowers his voice to ask how the meeting went. Wai Chil-jun slumps into his chair with a cold snort and asks how it could have gone, that the moment those people saw Korea's heavy first-round losses they swarmed in like vultures. On blood, he taps a cigarette twice on the desk and says the United States led the charge with 7 or 8 lackeys in tow, trying to force Korea to sign some so-called global resource rebalancing framework. A pretty name for a modern Plaza Accord that demanded Korea hand over its strategic reserves and open its resource channels. Jo Gyeonpyeong's fists clench on their own as he asks what the leadership said. Wai Chul-jun stares at him 3 seconds and asks what he thinks, then says the leadership slammed the table on the spot, that Korea bows to no one, that if they want resources they can come and take them. The warships and the guns are always ready. Jo Gyeonpyeong lets out a long breath. Wai Chil-jun, in a rare smile, says the timing was a gift, because while those people were posturing the broadcast sounded, Korean challenger Im Yop, perfect quality, 100,000-fold critical strike, and he wishes Ju Gyeonpyeong could have seen their faces, the American representative pretending to sip his tea with his hands shaking. Then his face goes serious and he asks whether the boy's file has been pulled, and Jo Gyeonpyeong hands over a craft folder adding that this one is born and raised inside the system, half one of their own. Wai Chul-jun breaks the seal and turns the pages. Im Yop, 21, registered in this city, a junior in the archaeology department at a Korean University of Science and Technology. Father, Im Chang-san, a sergeant first class in a Western military region unit, 24 years on the border. His hand pauses on the turn. 24 years. He spent 8 in the northwest himself, and felt he'd left half his life in the desert, and this Im Chang-san has guarded the nation's gate for a full 24. He reads on, Mother, Lee Mi, a military dependent who settled in their hometown after the boy was born to raise him alone, the city easier for his care. He turns to the medical report, left eye missing, fitted with a prosthetic vision-level monocular, and his hand stops. He closes the folder and sits silent a few seconds, then says it aloud, the Im father and son, the father over 20 years on the border, the son one-eyed and still dragged off by the supreme will to fight for Korea's survival. A whole family of loyal martyrs. Jo Gyeonpyeong nods and is about to answer when Wee Cheoljun goes on, that he admires them from the bottom of his heart, but the battle for national destiny is the survival of the nation, and he cannot judge by emotion. He taps the medical line. Half a field of vision gone is a serious handicap, survivable on a level 1 island and barely so, but real threats wait on level 2 and level 3, and his voice drops that the boy's first day was stunning, yet the road ahead is one of 9 deaths to 1 life. Jo Gyeonpyeong starts to speak, can't find it, then suggests low that with the father holding the border and the son risking his life in another world and only the mother left at home, perhaps they might send the family to the western military region to be near Im Chang-san, at least with someone to look after them. Wee Cheoljun nods and stands, that he's right, that the men at the front are bleeding and they cannot let the families in the rear feel the chill, and that he'll call the western military region and see what can be arranged. In the stone forest I sit cross-legged and put the last of the yolk in my mouth. Eggs for breakfast, this life is comfortable. Then a sharp cry knifes down from high overhead, and I jolt so hard the yolk nearly lodges in my throat. The feathered beast is back. I flatten on the spot, but flat isn't enough, so I grab a fistful of wood ash from the fire and smear it over everything I can reach. Face, neck, clothes, then another fistful worked into my hair. I don't know if the rock feather kite hunts by smell, but the roasted egg scent hasn't faded, and if that thing is tracking it, I'm finished. By the time I'm done, I look like a savage crawled out of a stove. On the feed, I'm a wretched ash-gray figure flat on the ground, but the viewers can see what I can't, that the rock feather kite is sweeping the high sky from the island's northeast and isn't heading my way at all, the stone forest between us and the distance still wide. They howl that I'm too cautious, the true saint of survival who plays dead at the first twitch. Someone noting the celebrity Ji Gyeon next door spent a half hour fixing his hair on waking because the style mustn't be messy. That's dignity. The crowd answers for me that my life mustn't be lost. That's the bottom line. The kite shrinks into the clouds and vanishes, and I wait another 2 minutes before pushing up, ash showering off my face as I slap my collar and spit out a mouthful of grit. A false alarm. Just as I move to stand, my left eye twitches, a strange flutter going through me, and I narrow it slightly and trigger the Eye of Destiny. On the ground, a thin red line is spreading from a rock crevice 3 meters from my feet, and my pupil shrinks as it branches. A second line, a third splitting off the middle, countless threads weaving into a web. And under my feet, the floating island itself is vibrating faintly. The explosion comes from deep in the ground before my brain can catch up, and my body moves first, legs driving me forward in a lunge, as gravel and dust blast skyward and the spot where I was lying tears wide open. Half a second slower and I'd be down there riding the wind. The earth bucks so hard I can't stand, and it lands on me all at once. The whole floating island is collapsing. Can't stop. Run. I'm up and bolting, the gear in my pack clattering. The roar of a world coming apart behind me, and out of the corner of my eye the stone forest where I slept is caving in and sinking. In the command center, the alarm screamed through the hall as a staffer springs up, voice cracking, reporting a large-scale geological collapse in the outermost floating island cluster of the Void Sea. Wee Cheoljun braces on the command console and looks up at the giant screen and asks the extent. Still calculating comes the answer. At least 133 level 1 islands confirmed fracturing, challengers from multiple countries involved, and every eye in the room snaps to the screen, split into dozens of segments all shaking violently, ground splitting, dust flying. He asks how many of theirs are caught in it. 5, the staffer says, pulling the relevant Korean feeds to the top. 063 Jang Wee, 066 Im Yeop, 081 Wang Sinwoo, 089 Du, and before the name finishes one screen goes black. 081 Wang Sinwoo confirmed fallen to his death, and the whole hall drops into dead silence. Wee Cheoljun's jaw tightens, and he orders the report continued, and the staffer reads that the United States has already lost 2 to falls, Saudi Arabia 3, Japan 1. The data still updating as another screen blacks out, an American named Jason Brown gone. On the American feed, a white man built like an ox is being driven to the edge of his island as the whole thing shatters and sinks behind him, and he swings his starter grappling hook at a small island across the gap and catches the rock wall. He grips the rope and swings out, but a turbulent updraft from the collapse hurls debris into the sky and a fragment shears the rope clean through, and he plummets into the cloud sea before he can even scream, the feed going black, leaving a mob of overseas keyboard warriors in disarray. On my feed, the viewers watch a dusty figure sprinting with their hearts in their throats, the island peeling away chunk by chunk behind him into the cloud sea. The chat a wall of run, and it's the apocalypse and cliffs on every side. Where is he supposed to go? Seo Myung-won goes pale, his lips trembling that a natural force at this scale is past the limits of human response, while Jin Guk-bong and So Chung-gran say nothing and only stare, every word of commentary gone weak and useless. I'm sprinting, the island falling apart underfoot, rocks shedding away into the cloud sea, the ground heaving up and dropping out so that every violent shock forces me onto a new line. Can't stop. Stopping is dying. I look up, and to the northwest the level 2 island hangs high above, the only road out, but a gap near 100 meters across separates us, with a vertical drop of dozens of meters on top of it, and the wind-chasing claw's cable is only 100 meters total. Will it even reach? A roar hits beneath me, and the slab I'm on tilts upward, the angle steepening, and I drop and grab a fissure and claw up on all fours toward the high side, knees gashing on the gravel, blood seeping. No time to care, just teeth gritted and climbing. 4 meters, 2, until I reach the top of the upturned rock and brace against it and stand. Above me, a rock the size of a car is falling. That's it. I push off with everything and launch myself into the air, as the slab below shatters into dozens of fragments and rains down toward the cloud sea, the wind screaming in my ears, and I throw my right arm up and aim the wind-chasing claw at that falling rock. The 3-pronged hook fires and bites in and clamps tight. The cable snaps back, and a brutal pull yanks me up with a tearing wrench through the bones of my right shoulder. I groan and grab the arm guard with my left hand to spread the strain, my feet finding the rock's surface, sinking with it but buying me a few precious seconds. From here to the level 2 cliff is 50 or 60 meters. Enough. And I raise my right arm to fire again, and the rock under me bucks as another fragment slams in from the side and both shatter at once. I step into empty air, my support gone, and drop toward the cloud sea below. In the command center, everyone holds their breath, some turning their heads away, Wai Cheljin's fists clenched until they creak, nails biting his palms, my figure on the screen falling against the sky full of the disintegrating island's debris. Back in his home city, Lee Mi covers her mouth and her knees give out and she goes down in front of the television, the cup on the table knocked over and spilling across the floor. On the western frontier, at an outpost, Im Chang-san has just come in from patrol with frozen soil still on his boots, standing in the duty room doorway clutching an old model phone with his son's feed on the screen. His comrades ringed around him, not daring to breathe. Falling. Weightlessness wraps my whole body. The wind rushing up from below, my view full of tumbling gravel and white cloud. Fear, of course, but the will to live keeps my head strangely clear. No room to worry about much now. Time to gamble. And I trigger the Eye of Destiny. The world in my left eye floods with color, and through the tumbling I force my focus onto one direction, that level 2 island. Gravel and air currents block my sight, and I can't make anything out, but my left eye sees it, lower on the cliff wall a thick green band of light hanging from the edge. A vine. The green exceptionally bright, safe and sturdy, maybe 50 meters above. That's it. Target locked. A sharp pain stabs the eye and I shut it at once, then grit my teeth and wrestle my posture straight in midair and lift my straining right arm and aim the wind-chasing claw that way. The hook fires, breaks through the currents, rides the faint airflow to the target, the 3 claws opening and closing and biting into the vine. The cable snaps taut and my body jerks to a stop and swings out into open air, my right shoulder a hair from leaving its socket, the sleeve lining digging into my skin. I hang there, right arm strung up by the cable, left hand clamped on the arm guard, while the wreckage of the entire level 1 island drags its dust down into the cloud sea, the kicked up mist surging dozens of meters high. My body turns slowly, the boundless cloud sea beneath my feet, the level 2 cliff above my head. On Korea's live stream, there is silence for 3 full seconds, and then the comments erupt like a volcano. The chat detonates, screaming who else and everyone on your feet, confessing they'd already typed eulogies, the room arguing over how to address me with proper reverence until it lands on Brother I. Jin Guk-bong stands and slams the commentary desk hard enough to bounce the microphone, shouting well done, that this isn't luck, this is skill. Seo Myung-won grips the table edge and wipes the sweat from his brow, and says he retracts his earlier judgment, that pulling off an extreme maneuver like that in a hopeless spot is a true miracle of survival. His fingertips trembling as he admires my nerve, so Changgran wipes the corner of her eye and turns away with a smile. In his home city, Lee Mi kneels in front of the television, her son suspended in midair over an endless cloud sea, alive. He's hanging up there, still moving. She can't hold on any longer, and covers her face with both hands. The wire that's been taut all night finally snapping, fear and despair and the after-tremor and relief surging out of her chest into heart-wrenching wails. As long as he's alive, as long as her boy is alive, it's enough. At the western outpost, Im Chang-san holds the phone to his chest, the picture still shaking, while a dozen comrades let out earth-shaking roars. The young soldiers hug and jump and shake his arm, a few rushing outside to roar at the mountains that the old squad leader's son is unbelievable. Like father, like son. Im Chang-san stands stock still, the screen light on a face cut with deep ravines that does not change at all, except that deep in those bloodshot eyes a layer of hot mist has long since gathered. In the command center, the cheering and applause nearly lift the roof, and Wei Cheljun finally unclenches his fists, palms slick with cold sweat, lets out a long breath of stale air, and turns to the seats below the screen and calls for quiet, ordering all data on his collapse summarized at once. 3 minutes later, Zhu Gianpyong comes up with a freshly printed brief that the event covered the outermost level 1 cluster of the Void Sea and caught 5 of theirs, 2 surviving, 063 Jiang Wei and 066 Im Yeo. 3 sacrificed, and Wei Cheljun's jaw muscles tighten as he asks for the global figure. Zhu Jianpyong turns the page. That 679 challengers met the collapse with 51 surviving, a survival rate of 7.51%. Less than 10%. Wei Cheljun orders the compensation work followed up at once. By the standard, not a single person missed. Right then, a few glaring highlighted messages drift across Korea's feed. The United States sneering that the gear carried me and my own strength is nothing. South Korea chiming in that their challenger would have survived with the same claw. The Korean section answers in seconds that the equipment was traded for with perfect quality, and that their own Jason had standard claw rope too, so where was his survival? And the American handles go silent before the crowd buries them. In the Void Sea, my situation is not easy. My right arm is pulled dead straight, and I dangle at the end of the cable, a sharp pain in the shoulder joint, as if it's being torn open, and I grit my teeth and press the switch on the arm guard with my left hand. The cable starts retracting inch by inch, and my body draws slowly upward, the dozens of meters stretching out endless, 30, 20, 10, the cliff face creeping closer until a thick layer of green moss appears in front of me. I lunge with my left hand and catch the cliff edge, fingers sinking into the soil, kick my legs, flip my body, and roll over the lip onto the ground of the level 2 island. I sprawl flat, chest heaving, my back against damp soft moss, that solid ground running from my spine out to my limbs as I stare up at the sky and pant. I survived. Damn lucky to steal another day. I lie there a full 2 minutes until my heartbeat settles, then sit up slowly and test the right arm. It hurts, but it's a strain, not a dislocation. A stroke of luck. The skin of my right knee is scraped dark red blood seeping through the fabric. A small wound, but in a world with no medicine even small can be fatal. I bring up the panel in my right eye, and it reads my name as Im Yop. My nationality is Korea. My vital signs is imperfect. My pollution at 0.02%. My spirit grid at 100. I freeze on that 0.02 because it has always read flat 0 before. So where did pollution come from? I run through everything I've eaten since yesterday, all of it confirmed clean by the Eye of Destiny. So it isn't the food. And finally my gaze drops to the right knee. I narrow my left eye and trigger the Eye of Destiny, and at the wound's edge sit a few tiny gray spots. I go quiet. They cling to the wound, not something I swallowed, but something that seeped in from the world around me, and the body's pollution is tied to the gray spots after all. Even a scrape can pollute me, which means high-dimensional energy invasion is everywhere in the Void Sea, or rather the Void Sea itself is a high-dimensional world. And I bet that from the first second everyone landed their bodies were already in contact with this, the only difference being who dies fast and who holds on. I don't linger in the thought. Some of the first batch have lived here over 10 days, and at 0.02 I'm a long way from death. So rather than dwell on it, I solve what's in front of me. I stand and brush the dirt and moss off me and look around, and it's nothing like a level 1 island. Under my feet is a stretch of moss running into a dense thicket of bushes, patches of forest deeper in, some trees so thick a few people couldn't ring them with their arms, rolling hills off in the distance. By the official classification, a level 2 island runs dozens of times the area of a level 1, larger than a small town by my guess. More resources, more cover, more threats. When I scanned this island from the air on the way down there were golden light spots on it, and a dozen red dots ring the gold, treasure, and danger right beside each other. But the first thing is a temporary place to hold up, a water source, shelter, somewhere to spend the night. I tighten my pack and check the wind-chasing claw, the 3 claws intact, the cable retracting fine, slide the dagger back into my belt, and start walking into the interior of the floating island. I step into the jungle of the level 2 floating island, my right knee throbbing where the pant leg has glued itself to the raw skin. Every tug of the fabric a small bright pain. I don't slow down. In a place whose dangers I haven't mapped, the fastest thing I can do for myself is learn the ground, so I keep moving and read it as I go. By now I've worked out the micro-rhythm of the Eye of Destiny. A quick blink frame of sight, then off. Then a few steps, then look again, which makes my route through the trees look insane to anyone watching. A flat, clear apron of moss opens to my front left, an obvious path, and I cut sideways into the brush on the right instead, then swing wide around a cluster of plump, dripping berries glistening right in front of me. The Korean livestream fills with confusion at my pathing, half the room convinced the wound has gone septic and cooked my brain, the other half snapping back that I clearly have my reasons, and they should remember the egg. I don't hear any of it. I stop, my ears catching a thread of running water off to the front right, and that gets my full attention, so I change direction and hack the blocking vines apart with my dagger. The last leaf folds aside and the scene shifts, a stream 3 or 4 meters wide lying across my path. The water clear enough to count the pebbles on the bottom while the weeds sway with the current. Silver scales flash on the surface. Fish. I walk over fast and the panel names them for me. Silver shuttlefish. The Korean feed lights up at running water and live fish certain I'm set now, telling me to start a fire and cook. Seo Myungwon pours cold water on it. He warns that wild water hides underwater currents and parasites that kill. And worse, that my single eye has no stereoscopic depth, that refraction off the surface will turn every distance and depth I see into a lie. So if I try to spearfish with a branch, my hit rate is basically 0. The overseas feeds that had been holding their breath pile straight in the moment his hardcore explanation lands, jeering that a blind man wants to catch fish and that the cripple's luck has finally run dry. Jin Gukbong's knuckles whiten, the veins standing up on his neck, and he's halfway out of his seat to fire back when I do something on the screen that none of them expect. I stand at the stream with my left eye narrowed. In the clear water, fine gray spots drift everywhere, dense as silt, and when I look at the silver shuttlefish themselves, I find the same thing, varying amounts of gray clinging to their bodies. I curl my lip and turn away. The water itself is contaminated, the fish in it carrying that contamination in their flesh. So I head straight upstream along the bank. 100 meters, 200, until the stream ends at a moss-furred crevice in the rock, with groundwater welling out of it in a steady pour, and a sweep of my left eye reads it pure light green. Not a single gray spot so clean that nothing lives in it at all. I crouch and test it with my hand, icy cold. Then roll up the blood-stiff right pant leg, cup the clear water, and grip my teeth as I scrub the mud and the dried scabs off the wound. When I check it again with the eye of destiny, the gray spots are still sitting in the broken skin, and I almost laugh at myself, expecting to rinse off an energetic substance with creek water. High-dimensional pollution doesn't wash. I cut a strip from the hem of my shirt with a dagger and bind the wound tight. Then unsling my pack, fill the small folding iron pot to the brim straight from the source, and drink in long swallows until my parched throat finally feels human again. So Chomgran's eyes brighten on the feed as she points out that I didn't act blindly, that going upstream to the source guaranteed safe drinking water and cut my risk of infection in one move. That it isn't just self-care but long-range thinking. Seo Myungwon opens his mouth and can't push a single word out, because from a wilderness survival standpoint, the find the source logic is airtight. The Korean crowd that was wringing its hands a minute ago wheels around at once, crowing that this is the detail work of a true old hand, and demanding the foreign dogs come back out and keep barking. And one foreign handle that does answer gets told to bark like a dog for the room and goes quiet. Petty, sure, but it's my pettiness now and I'll take it. I shoulder the full pot and start back, my left eye flickering on and off as I walk. A fish the length of my forearm slides past my feet, gray spots on its tail. Rejected. A smaller one leaps clear of the surface, gills caked with gray. Get lost. I carry the pot in one hand and keep the other empty, and every time a fish crosses the stream I stop, look it over carefully, shake my head, and move on. The look but don't touch routine throws the live stream into fresh confusion. The chat deciding I must be picking out a fish bride. The foreign feeds insisting I simply can't catch anything, and am dressing up the failure. In the third research group of the Disaster Prevention Administration, Yuk Jin sits hunched at his workstation, with his eyes locked on me, fingers hammering the keyboard, while his recording software fires off screenshot after screenshot. Every time I pause to study a fish, he pulls the frame, enlarges it, and lays it beside the last. To the naked eye, the fish barely differ in size or in how they swim. The first one he passed over, the second one he passed over, and Yukjin drags his glasses off and tosses them on the desk. I'm filtering, he mutters, again by a standard he cannot begin to read. Fruit yesterday, live fish today. The strange wandering route before that, and the only explanation is that I am seeing something none of them can. What exactly is it, he says to the empty room. My gaze sweeps the water, and my steps stop. 3 meters ahead, in a pile of pebbles among the weeds, a fat fish of full forearm-long roots, slowly along the bottom. And when I trigger the Eye of Destiny, its whole body lights up pale green. Gills, scales, belly, not one gray spot. Clean. You're the one. I set the water-filled iron pot down with care, wedge it upright between 2 stones, then straighten and raise my right arm. The Korean feed has already guessed what's coming. Somebody muttering that this is using a cannon to swat a mosquito. Somebody else just yelling to fire the cannon. I swing my arm a fraction, line up the wind-chasing claw, and press the switch with my thumb. The 3-pronged hook punches through the surface and takes the forearm-length silver shuttlefish dead on, its tail slapping up a sheet of spray. I release the thumb and press again, the cable screaming back at full retraction, and the fish rips out of the water and lands flat on the grassy bank. High-end ingredients usually just need the simplest physical handling, I think, and I walk over, pick up a stone and bring it down on the fish's head. The tail jerks twice and goes still. Finally, some meat. The Korean livestream is pure delight, the running joke being the wind-chasing claw complaining that it was built to soar across the earth and is now a jungle fishing rod. The overseas feeds can't sit still, the bitterness almost dripping off the screen, sneering that I only know how to lean on my gear and would have starved long ago without that claw, that a cripple has to rely on attachments to scrounge a meal. The Korean crowd doesn't even bother cursing this time, just reminds them that the claw was traded for with perfect quality and asks, pointedly, Whether the poor things over there have won. So Myungwon shakes his head with a face full of waste, calling it a precious tool spent on a trivial chore. Jin Gukbong slaps the desk laughing that I'm simply making the best use of everything, that refusing to adapt is the only real stupidity, while So Chonggran holds her dignified smile and says that in front of survival, efficiency beats everything. I work the bank for the next target, and soon a second silver shuttlefish the size of the first drifts into view. Same arm, same shot. Caught. I crouch with the dagger to gut and fillet the pair, and a huge ripple spreads across the surface. From under a moss-skinned boulder on the bottom, a silver shadow eases out, and my hand stops, because that is a giant silver shuttlefish, nearly a meter long. It has none of the timidity of the small ones, its streamlined body throwing off a cold hard gleam under the waterlight, swimming the shallows openly with the arrogance of something that owns this stream. My left eye narrows. Pure light green, brighter even than the last, not a single gray spot. A top-tier ingredient. My eyes light up and my throat works on its own. The sky itself is chasing me down to feed me today. I stand, confident, raise my right arm, and aim at the thing in the water, and the hook shoots out. But the giant silver shuttlefish twists mid-water and forces the claw aside, the 3 prongs closing on a clump of rotten weed instead. Worse, it doesn't flee. It swaggers right up to the stream's edge, lifts its big head clear, swells its gills, opens its mouth, and spits a jet of water that hits me square on the pant leg. The Korean livestream loses its mind, the chat swearing the fish is provoking me, that the damage is nothing but the insult is off the charts. One viewer claims he can read 30% mockery and 70% cold contempt in its eyes, the whole room vowing the fish ends up in the pot tonight or they won't be able to swallow their own frustration. I wipe the droplets off my face, the heat flaring up my chest. Am I really being schooled by a fish? I retract the cable and aim again. Fire, fire, 2 shots back to back, but the big fish jumps left and right on pure agile positioning, and I drag up nothing but 2 more clumps of weed, and it settles by the bank again, gills pulsing, mocking the 2-legged animal on the shore. I pull a slow breath and force the anger down. Fine, a straight line burst isn't enough. You want to play mechanics with me. I put the wind-chasing claw away and reach back for the 10-meter grappling hook off the side of my pack, the junk starter tool, and the livestream goes blank with confusion. Since if the high-end projectile couldn't land it, what good is a crude hand-thrown hook? I take the rope end, swing it twice, and hurl the iron hook hard at the water behind the big fish. It crashes in with no real accuracy but an enormous commotion, and the fish bolts away from the splash. Exactly the wrong direction, because I've been ready the whole time. I snatch a fist-sized stone off the ground and throw it with everything I have at the spot it's fleeing toward. The stone cracks the surface in front of it, the iron hook thrashing behind it, and the big fish panics, lashes its tail on pure escape instinct, and breaks clear of the water into the air. The instant it hangs suspended, I read the timing, and my left hand slaps the switch on my right arm. The wind-chasing claw fires, the hook catches the torso in midair, the 3 claws snap shut and lock it in place, and the fish drops back thrashing, kicking up clouds of mud and sand. But the cable's already taut and there's no hope of escape. The whole combo runs off in one unbroken motion. The entire network freezes for a few seconds. Then the comments avalanche, the room screaming that I predicted the fish's prediction, that this is technique and not luck. The fish itself accused of bringing agility to a mind games fight, somebody crowning it art of war fishing. A foreign handle insists it has to be a script, AI generated, and gets buried instantly. Seo Myung-won catches his sliding glasses, stunned, breathing that inducing the prey's movement to forcibly manufacture a kill shouldn't even be possible. Jin Gukbong roars that forcing the prey into your firing lane is top-tier tactical literacy, and so Chonggran applauds hard, adding that it isn't only tactics but composure, that after a string of failures I kept my head. On the bank I plant a wide stance, left hand gripping the bracer to spread the strain, and haul. Get up here. The giant silver shuttlefish carves a deep muddy furrow across the grass, still thrashing, and I pick up the stone and walk over. You spray me, then you dare to keep dodging. I aim at the fish's head, my hand rises and falls, twice, dull and final, and after the thuds the big fish lies dead straight as if it just finished basic training. I toss the stone aside and let out a long breath, that warm flush of a good harvest spreading through me, then draw the dagger and crouch to scale and gut and clean all 3 trophies in the stream. When they're done I break off a thick branch, scrape away the twigs and thorns, and thread the catch through the gills, the meter-long giant and the 2 forearm fish weighing heavy across my shoulder, the water-filled iron pot in my other hand. I narrow my eyes toward the deeper jungle, the meal handled and only one thing left, a place to settle. Deep in the trees I carry the strung fish on my shoulder and the iron pot in my left hand, heading for the higher ground rising at the island's center, where the odds of finding a dry cave are better. My route goes strange again. After 20 meters I stop short, cut a hard 90 degrees, and shove into the waist-high thorns on my right. Then a dozen meters on I trace an irregular curve around a small, perfectly flat, dry patch of fallen leaves. The Korean chat is back to despairing at my movement, a few of them genuinely seasick from the zigzag, one swearing his grandfather walks exactly like this after half a bottle of liquor. Seo Myungwon shakes his head and points out that I've walked at least 50 extra meters just to dodge a flat patch of ground, that aimless detours under a load waste physical strength, and that wasted strength is lethal in the wild. Jin Gukbong strokes his chin and for once doesn't refute him, because he knows special operations, but even he can't read a reason into it. I have no idea what they're saying. A few dozen meters on, my feet stop dead. The moment I trigger the Eye of Destiny, a massive red aura floods my left eye's vision, more than 100 meters ahead, and a sharp sting drives into the back of the eyeball, so I shut it at once. The trees block my line of sight, and the panel in my right eye shows no identification. But that red mass is bigger than a brown bear. Threat. Fatal threat. I hold my breath, brace the pot with my left hand, grip the fishpole on my shoulder with my right, and press flat against the nearest trunk without a heartbeat of hesitation. After a few seconds, I steal one fast, fatal glance with my left eye. The thing hasn't moved, no sign of leaving. If you won't go, I will, and I am not scared. This is a strategic retreat. I tiptoe backward, light on the ground, and once I've put a dozen careful steps between us, I turn and slip away at speed in the opposite direction. The whole frightened bird routine bewilders the room, the chat unable to find a single moving leaf in front of me, and the overseas feeds pile in at once, hooting that the Korean coward got spooked witless by the wind, that I ran from a shadow. The Korean crowd boils, wanting to fire back and not knowing what I'm fleeing from. Then, while the trolls are still spamming, a terrifying roar erupts from the hills behind me, a sound wave that tears through the dense forest and flushes a distant flock of birds into the sky, the whole feed seeming to shudder with it. The comments detonate, the Korean side howling for the foreign dogs to come back out and keep barking now that they've gone mute, calling this not cowardice but foresight, top-tier reconnaissance. One viewer apologizing for the grandfather joke. In the third research group, Yuk Jin sits motionless, replaying my stop, my hide, my retreat, and the roar in slow motion over and over. The roar came from over 100 meters off, he reasons. The wind is southbound and I was downwind, so no scent could have carried. The dense forest blocked all sight, and the beast only roared after I'd already pulled back, so there was no sound to hear beforehand. His breathing goes heavy. It wasn't intuition. My body reacted only after confirming a target, and combined with the baffling route, it means I didn't sense the danger. I saw it. He logs it in the file under left eye hypothesis, that the subject's left eye is suspected to carry an energy vision that penetrates physical obstacles, then pushes up his glasses, his stare gone feverish, and asks how many more surprises I'm hiding. In the jungle, I shiver for no reason at all. Who the hell is thinking about me? I oil my heels and keep walking briskly without a backward look, and only after a solid 200 meters, well clear of that area, do I let my shoulders down a little. The hills are out. The cave plan is scrapped, and I need a new spot for the night. 10 more minutes and my pace finally eases. 2 giant trees stand in the jungle ahead, trunks so thick it would take 5 or 6 grown adults to ring one with their arms, crowns punching up into the clouds past 50 meters, blotting out the sky, the gap between them about 30 meters. The roots of one have twisted into a roomy natural hollow over 2 meters deep, tall enough to crouch inside, the floor a relatively dry layer of soil. I scan it by reflex with my left eye, a few gray spots but nothing serious, the kind of thing I can't fully dodge anywhere here. I study the surroundings again, my gaze resting a few seconds on the space between the 2 trees, a plan already forming, then walk to the hollow, set down the fishpole, and place the pot of clean water on a flat stone. I roll my aching right shoulder but don't sit to rest. I draw the dagger and gather dead branches of every thickness from nearby, because the first thing is a fire and a full stomach. The Korean room exhales in relief at the sight. Glad I've found a place, calling the hollow secure, noting that compared to Gion next door still trading wits with bugs, I'm practically on vacation, telling me to build a proper long-term shelter, so I stop running every day. So Chongren looks admiringly at the busy figure on screen and says my adaptability is astonishing, that when the plan changed I found an alternative fast. Seo Myung won't follow her lead. He grants that the hollow is effortless and the giant tree makes a natural wall for defense and reflecting the fire's heat, but the drawbacks are lethal too. The damp forest floor breeds venomous insects and snakes that crawl toward warmth when the night cools. And worse, the semi-open mouth means that if something larger than him plugs the entrance in the dark, he has nowhere to run. Hearing all that, Yukjin only sneers, telling expert Seo not to speak too soon, that this kid doesn't play by common sense, and that he hopes the man's glasses survive the slapping his face is about to take. I bring back a big armful of dry fallen leaves and crumble them to powder between my hands, then pull the flint and scrape down with the dagger, sparks dropping into the tinder. I bend and breathe on it gently, and practice has made this easy, flames climbing in moments, twigs fed in bit by bit, until the fire steadies and the orange light pushes back the damp chill. I sit cross-legged, my gaze landing on the meter-long giant silver shuttlefish, and I draw the dagger and line it up on the fattest part of the belly to carve off a piece and take the edge off my hunger. The blade is a breath from coming down when I stop. I stare at the meat, my throat bobbing, and in the end I swallow hard and put the dagger away. I stand, cut a few large plant leaves nearby, and wrap the giant fish and one of the small ones separately, then lay them on a shaded, well-ventilated rock. Eating the big catch myself is too wasteful, I mutter. I'll save it to boost my performance tonight, and the words carry clean to the ears of millions on the Korean feed. The chat floods, begging me to just eat it, that I'm half dead and who cares about performance. A wall of viewers admitting they're crying at their screens because I'm risking my life to scrape together better things for the country. Right on schedule, the overseas handles swarm in, calling the Korean man a fine actor forcing sentiment over a fish he simply couldn't finish. Hypocrites who can't even land a meal and still want face. The provocation stings every Korean watching, but before they can start cursing, Jin Gukbong slaps his papers off the desk and stands. That's absolute garbage, he says, his voice through the microphone setting everyone's eardrums buzzing. That the prophet-rotted cowards over there don't understand a damn thing. He just survived a near-death fall, his strength is wrung dry, his right leg is torn open. He needs high-energy food more than anyone alive, and he still didn't eat it, because he values Korea's life over his own, and people who only grasp robber logic will never understand what Korean heritage means. Every word lands like a thunderclap. So Chongran takes it up, quieter than Jin Gukbong but cutting straight to the heart, that certain countries may never understand in a lifetime, that there is a kind of faith where even in hell a man holds up the morning sun for his own people. That I'm not merely surviving alone, I'm fighting for Korea's future. The Korean audience boils over and counterattacks, and after one relentless volley the overseas trolls are crushed and scatter. Outside the hollow I whittle 2 forked branches, plant them on either side of the fire, and lay a straight strip stick across as a simple grill. I bring over a 4-arm-length silver shuttlefish, run the spit in through its mouth and out the tail, and set it over the flame. On the rack you go. As it roasts, fine oil bubbles bead along the skin, grease dripping into the fire and hissing up in white smoke, the rich smell of meat filling the air, and I turn the stick now and then so every part cooks even. A dozen minutes later the whole fish is golden, crisp outside, tender within, and I set the iron pot by the fire too, because a man needs hot water. This survival life is being lived with a little refinement. I lift the fish off, and not caring about the heat, I tear off a big piece and cram it in, panting through the burn, the firm delicious flesh and balanced fat flooding my mouth, chewing in great bites and swallowing with pure satisfaction. The Korean room flips in a heartbeat. The viewers who were wiping tears a moment ago now gulping helplessly, one admitting his own prepackaged meal suddenly tastes like nothing, another saying his soul drifted off with the fish oil when it dripped, somebody crying so hard the tears are running into the corners of his mouth. The sharp-eyed ones switch to cross-region scouting and report back, gleeful, that the Japanese woman named Matsushita is over there crunching raw beetles, with the juice bursting out, that the Indian challenger is being chased by a wild boar. Ji next door found a few wild fruits after half a day and is eating them with a grimace, and apart from the first batch survivors, nobody in the second batch is living as comfortably as I am. I strip the 4-arm fish down to a skeleton, kick the bones into the fire to destroy the evidence, and take a small sip of hot water, full and content, leaning back against the rough bark with my eyes closed. A short rest pulling my strength and my strung nerves back at once. 10 minutes later I open my eyes, stand nimbly and draw the dagger, the light not gone yet, and plunge into the surrounding jungle. I grab a flexible green vine, wrench it hard, cut it off at the root, coil it and loop it around my neck. Thick fallen branches I pick up off the ground directly, and the ones still growing on trees I notch deep with the dagger, then drive my heel into them until they snap, repeating it through the trees. On the feed, Seo Myung-won, who has been holding back a while, finally sits up straight, his brows easing into the relief of "you finally figured it out." He announces that I've discovered the hollow's natural flaw, that my purpose in gathering vines and branches is plain. I'm setting tripwires around the outer perimeter and a ring of inverted wooden spike traps, the standard defensive operation for jungle survival, so that an approaching beast snags the wire while the spikes do physical damage, and buy me reaction time. He takes a sip of tea and asserts that my learning and adaptability are extremely strong, that this step is rock solid. On screen I make a wide circle through the jungle, drag a heap of vines and arm-thick branches back to the base of the giant tree, and dump the whole load into the open space between the two trunks. Then, I clap the dust off my hands and walk to the tree without a hollow, look up, and run my gaze all the way to the crown dozens of meters above, lush and tangled. Question marks flood the Korean chat. Seo Myung-won's commentary catches in his throat. I step back 2 paces, raise my right arm and aim the wind-chasing claw straight up. I press the switch, and the 3-pronged hook fires up and bites into a thick branch fork 20 meters overhead. I tug down hard to confirm it's anchored, then start the retraction, the cable tightening, my feet leaving the ground, my whole body shooting upward like I stepped into an elevator, the 20-meter rise gone in a blink. I brace my soles against the bark and stand steady where the main trunk first splits, the branch intersection forming a natural depression with a bed of old fallen leaves at the bottom. I crouch and sweep it with my hand, flat and roomy, just enough for a grown man to lie down and rest, and I raise my eyebrows, pleased. Sleeping on the ground with the venomous snakes and the bugs is a masochism I happen not to own. At the commentary desk, Seo Myung-won, who had just been preaching ground defense science, goes silent, his mouth hanging, his cheeks flushing bright red, And after a full 5 seconds of blank staring, the man quietly lifts his cup and takes a tactical sip to cover it. The audience catches up and goes wild laughing, deciding a true sneak never lives on the first floor, that every time Seo opens his mouth I do the exact opposite, that his jinxing power is legendary, somebody afraid there are thorns at the bottom of his cup from how hard he swallowed. Jin Gukbong roars laughing beside him that I'm a good lad and that Seo misjudged it this time. Seo sets down his thermos, throws up his hands and admits with a bitter smile that he was too dogmatic, that this kid's thinking cannot be read by common sense. So Chongran fights down her own laugh and smooths it over that conventional judgment is fine. It's just that the trump cards in my hands let me step outside the norm. In the third research group, Yuk Jin sits with his fingers laced under his chin, looks at Seo's flushed face on the screen, and lets out an open cold snort. Slap swollen, he says, pushing up his glasses with a fanatic light in his eyes, that what could a mediocrity possibly understand, that in the whole world only he understands me. Half crouched in the depression, I run the math fast. This is an excellent shelter, the dozens of meters of height escaping both the damp ground miasma and the creatures that hunt by scent, and with the wind-chasing claw nobody else can climb up while I drop and rise in seconds. The drawbacks are just as lethal. High places run cold, the nighttime temperature up here far lower than on the ground, and I can't light a fire in a tree without simply roasting myself. And the open edge means one bad roll in my sleep sends me over. Still better than the hollow below. If there's a problem you solve it, so I get to work. Pulling the dagger, straddling a thick branch, carving a row of perfectly sized slots into several limbs with quick clean strokes, then reattaching the cable and sliding back down. Back at the material pile, I trim the excess forks off the thick branches and scrape away the stinging thorns, straighten the thin vines into loops and sling them across my body like a bandolier, then take flight again to the branch 20 meters up. I unload the vines, point my right arm down, aim the wind-chasing claw at the heap on the ground, and fire, the hook biting into a thick branch. Retract. The limb hoists into the air and rides up to the crown, and the Korean chat tumbles into fresh revelry, calling it a crane. The running joke now is the wind-chasing claw protesting that its high-end combat equipment being worked as a tower crane, the room agreeing that practicality is king and that a claw which can haul wood is a good claw. With everything hauled up, I turn into a ruthless old carpenter, laying the branches flat along the edge, locking them into the slots I'd carved, lashing the joints tight with the flexible vines, crossing and reinforcing again and again until the thick branches run out and a simple guardrail rings the depression. I shove it hard, solid enough. To block the wind, I make another claw trip to the ground, cut a load of broad plant leaves, hoist them up whole and layer them inside the rail as a windbreak, then break a few leaves and twigs off the giant tree itself and weave them onto the outside as visual camouflage. To sleep softer, I clear the old leaves out of the depression, gather plenty of dry dead leaves nearby, carry them up and bed the hollow with them, then hook my pack off the ground next door and haul it up, pull out the sleeping bag and spread it. Done. I look around and nod to myself, because I'm a damn genius. I pat myself on the back, drop back to the ground, and look up from below, where the anti-fall rail blends so cleanly into the crown that it looks completely natural. The Korean chat is full of amazement, calling me a wilderness construction master, marveling that I even thought of external camouflage, that while everyone else still sleeps in the wind and dew, I've moved into a high-rise duplex, that this is the racial talent of Korea, infrastructure maniacs. The sky darkens and night comes on, the temperature starting to fall. I slide down the cable to the ground, where the fire outside the hollow has burned to dull red coals, and I feed in a few pieces of dry wood and breathe gently underneath until the flames climb again. I bring over the last forearm-length silver shuttlefish, skewer it on a branch, and set it across the fire, the oil dripping and the white smoke rising and the meat smell drifting out. When it's roasted, I dig in with my hands and feast, my stomach long empty after the afternoon's labor, no seasoning but the firm texture and clean taste making up for all of it. In a flash, the whole fish is picked bare, and I kick the bones into the fire as usual, burp, and wipe the grease from my mouth. I stand and walk to the shaded stone from earlier, and lift the leaves off it. The giant silver shuttlefish lies there quietly, nearly a meter long. Not a single gray spot on it, the snow-white flesh at the cut in its belly bobbing my throat all on its own. I carry it in both hands to a flat patch of open ground, raise my left wrist and press the button on the terminal. A translucent pale blue light frame projects out and wraps the giant silver shuttlefish, and the panel in my right eye reads it for me. One giant silver shuttlefish detected, confirm upload. I stare at it without a flicker of hesitation. Upload. The light frame contracts and the giant silver shuttlefish scatters into points of light and is gone. The announcement rings through everyone's ears the instant the light frame closes. Korean Challenger Im Yop. Resources uploaded successfully. Detecting the giant silver shuttlefish read as perfect quality and rare, triggering a 50,000 times critical hit. I sit there a beat, then catch myself counting on my fingers, because one of those fish runs a good 30 or 40 pounds across my shoulder. And 40 pounds times 50,000 comes out to some number my brain refuses to hold. In the end, I just scratch the back of my head and give up on the math. Because whatever the figure is, it's an absurd mountain of meat, and that's all that matters. Half a world away, on the square outside the National Resource Warehouse on Blue Star, 50,000-meter-long silver shuttlefish pour out of the void at once, the fishy reek rolling across the whole square, the bodies heaping into a shimmering silver hill of flesh. The logistics crew freezes, then breaks into a roar, a supervisor screaming into his walkie-talkie to scramble every cold chain truck within reach before the haul spoils. On the Korean livestream, the feed turns to one ecstatic blur, the running joke being that my dopey finger counting just exposed the one weakness of a god. The fishermen of the country declaring that this round belongs to them and daring anyone to call them skunked ever again. The foreign feeds lose their composure all at once, jealousy dripping off the screen, the chorus of accusations running from cheating to a system loophole to a demand that our results be cancelled, and the haul handed over to them. Jin Buk-bong can't sit on it. He slaps the desk and lets the foreign feeds have it through the microphone, snapping that blaming a loophole for your own empty hands is like a man who can't relieve himself blaming the earth for having no gravity, and that the weak should train more instead of begging for attention. So Chungran lands the cleaner cut with a gentler voice, saying she understands how certain countries feel, that watching others feast while you swallow your own spit naturally opens a gap, and that the polite word for it is incompetent rage. The two of them pour gasoline on Korean morale, and under the barrage, the overseas trolls get scorched without a window to fire back. In a small home in H City, the glow of the screen lights up Lee Mi's face. Her son sits by his campfire in the footage, the right side of the feed an unbroken wall of praise scrolling past his name. Her eyes go a little red, but her whole face shines with relief and pride, because the boy on that screen is no longer the one-eyed teenager who needed her watching over him at every turn. He's become a hero of Korea. In the third research group of the Disaster Prevention Administration, Yuk-jin hears the announcement and shows no surprise at all, because my confident fishing through the whole afternoon had already told him this was coming. What gnaws at him now is the hidden rule behind quality. One stream, that many fish, and somehow I pick out the single perfect one every time. A flash crosses his face, the edge of a clue almost in his grip, and he stabs the communicator to summon his assistant, ordering every scrap of livestream footage for every challenger from the moment they boarded the plane. The assistant asks if he means the 2 Korean batches. Yuk-jin shakes his head and tells him no, every single challenger on Blue Star, every country, all of it. Out on a level 3 floating island deep in the void sea, the one surviving soldier king from Korea's first batch sits alone in a cave. Seo Hae-bong hears my announcement, holds quiet a long moment, then smiles to himself and wonders aloud how this kid keeps pulling it off. He brings up his own national destiny screen and reads his pollution at 4.2%. After surviving this long, he's begun to feel that quality and pollution are tied together, watching his own creep up from 0 without ever grasping what the word means, unable to tell which piece of meat is cleaner or which fruit is deadly. The one thing he's certain of is that since he arrived, his appetite has climbed and his strength has grown, and yet his spirit grid reads 99.65%, dropped at some point he never noticed, the screen naming it his mental health, even though nothing in his head feels wrong. He sighs, taps the upload terminal, and a pale light frame wraps a cloud feather chicken trussed in vines beside him. Upload. The bird scatters in a flash, and the announcement calls it good quality, a 6,000 times critical hit, and the Korean feed comes alive again. Seo Hae-bong scratches his hair, muttering that apart from running a little fast, the thing is no different from a Blue Star chicken. So how on earth is it being judged? And he sinks into the exact same confusion that's eating Yuk-jin alive. Night deepens, and the daily peak of uploads rolls in from every country, most of it standard or flawed, the occasional high multiplier standard sparking a celebration somewhere. Then America strings 2 hits back to back, a velvet grass sheep at good and 5,000 times, then a second perfect from a challenger named William Davis, 40,000 times. The American feed swarms our livestream with their chests puffed out, crowing that they have perfect level resources too, and that tonight belongs to free America. The Korean audience reads the resource line, then detonates with laughter, because the perfect quality haul that man guarded all day without moving an inch is a field of dream hemp leaves. The room can barely type through the wheezing, the kindest take being the truth that Korea feeds the country its survival resources while America feeds its people their spiritual ones, each nation to its own conditions. None of that clamor reaches the void sea. On my level 2 floating island, the jungle is pitch black, the only light my campfire throwing orange across the dirt, and I sit cross-legged looking up at the treetop duplex I built with my own hands. I'm not naive enough to call sleeping high up safe. Who knows what climbs trees in the dead of night, or what poisonous vine creeps along a branch without a sound. So in a godforsaken place like this, I'd rather be paranoid than dead, and before I go up, I'm rigging a few warning gadgets down below. I'm in no rush to climb. I pull the dagger and walk to a pile of short, thick branches, and a flick of the wrist sends wood chips flying as I shave one end of each into a point, and an hour later, dozens of them are sharpened. At the base of the giant tree, I drive each spike into the soil at a slant, tip pointed outward, building a physical thorn halo ring around the roots. A base layer isn't enough, so I drag over the barbed vine I hauled back during the day, the kind where a single scratch opens a bleeding wound, and I wrap it around the trunk at varying heights, from waist to over my head, an anti-climbing net. Then the old tradition I won't forget. I rake the ash out from under the fire and scatter it in an even circle around the whole thorn halo. With the ground defenses laid, I brush my hands clean, sling a leaf-wrapped pouch of wood ash around my neck for later, raise my right arm, and the wind-chasing claw fires me back up to my flat 20 meters in the air. Up top, I anchor the hook to the main trunk as a safety line, straddle a forked branch, and feel my way out toward the canopy's edge, where my tree's lush crown can't help tangling with the branches of the giant trees beside it. Every junction that could serve as a high-altitude bridge, I lash with barbed vine and dust thick with ash. You guard against things that walk, against things that climb, and most of all against the ones that come across the rooftops. With all of it set, I let out a long breath, crawl back into the hollow, and into my sleeping bag, keep the dagger in a reverse grip against my chest, and let the wind in the leaves carry me under in a few minutes flat. Down in the Korean feed, the night owls are floored, calling it a three-dimensional lockdown, textbook camping. One of them already off to fence the greenery outside his own building to prevent trouble. Seo Myung-won nods along at the commentary desk, granting that my caution runs past what he expected, that the layered defense is a textbook case of risk avoidance. Then night settles over the whole void sea, and while I sleep soundly, for the challengers who climbed onto a level 2 island today and never found shelter, the gates of hell are only now swinging open. A level 1 island is thin on resources and life, so a night in the open just leaves you cold. A level 2 island is another order of thing entirely, because once it goes fully dark, the nocturnal creatures come out to hunt. On the Indian feed, Challenger Ram lies curled and shivering in his sleeping bag on a boulder, when an arm-thick centipede climbs up beside him, rears its head, and sprays a jet of dark green fluid that eats a smoking hole through the fabric before it crawls inside. The screaming and the thrashing last a dozen seconds, and then the feed cuts to black, and the man is gone. On the South Korean feed, Park Budong got lucky with a dry tree hollow before dark but laid no defenses. Not even ash, and in the deep of the night a dense swarm of insects boils up out of the soil and pours up his pant legs. He saves his life by slapping himself raw and rolling on the open ground. But that surgically perfected face, finer than a woman's, comes out pitted with bites, and his feed fills with wailing. On the Kangaroo Country feed, Challenger Williams spread his ash and set a few traps and slept on a branch a dozen meters up sure he was safe, until a dozen pairs of ghost green eyes wink on across the neighboring crowns and pad silently along the connected branches to ring him in. On my side, a visitor arrives too. A creature like a leopard, but a full size larger than a calf, walks out of the brush below the giant tree, lifts its head to scent the human smell above, stops at the ash line, snorts in disdain, and steps right over it for the roots. It crouches to spring, front limbs lifting, and the slanted wooden spike opens the flesh of its leg, and it falls back with a low growl, paces the base half a circle, then coils its hindquarters and leaps clean over the thorn halo straight at the trunk, claws out for the bark. The barbs of the anti-climbing net punch into its paw pads. The pain robs it of any purchase, and it drops out of the air onto the spikes below, slicing 2 more bleeding gashes across its waist. It rolls clear in a sorry heap, throws one furious glare at the cursed thorny tree, and limps off into the dark, beaten. I never so much as stir. The Korean night owls light up, hollering that the tower took first blood, that I'm farming wild monsters in my sleep without a scratch, that I demolished the house downstairs while snoring upstairs, signing off with "Good night, Brother Eye, and see you tomorrow." But inside the Disaster Prevention Administration Command Center, the mood runs the opposite way. The hall is lit bright and the air sits heavy, the giant screen carrying the live feeds of Korea's 24 remaining challengers, 7 of them blown up large and pinned. The 7 who never found a stronghold before dark. One is jammed in a rock crevice at the island's edge, lips gone purple, shaking and unable to stop. One waves a torch through the trees, hoping the flame holds the night off. The rest grip daggers with their backs to big trunks, nerves at the snapping point, every face full of fear. Director Wai Cheljin stands at the console, his gaze raking across the 7 screens, his color terrible, grinding out that even if these men had just dug a hole and buried themselves halfway, it would be something. Beside him, the intelligence team head, Ju Gaeonpyeong, lets out a long breath and asks the quiet question of how many of these will still be alive after tonight. Morning comes, and sunlight cuts through the canopy into the flat 20 meters up. I open my eyes on a huge yawn, because I slept dead to the world straight through to dawn, and when I crawl out and stretch my joints crack and I feel oddly bottomless, like there's no floor to the strength in me. First thing after waking is the perimeter, so I check the thorn vines and the ash up high and find it all intact, no sign anything came across the rooftops in the night, and I nod, satisfied. I pack the sleeping bag, fire the wind-chasing claw into a thick node on the trunk, leap, and ride the cable back down to the ground for my routine inspection. I walk the ash line first. There are messy crawl tracks at the edge, and a few insects flipped on their backs, legs stiff, dead as doornails. And I flick the corpses away with the dagger, unimpressed at how poorly the things hold up to a little alkali. Inward, at the thorn halo, my feet stop, because one slanted spike is stained dark red and a tuft of grayish-brown fur is caught in its barbs. I look up the trunk to the anti-climbing net, where a length of barbed vine has been torn loose and still carries a few smears of blood, and there are clear marks of something struggling and rolling away into the deep jungle. So I had guests last night, but their skills weren't up to it, and not one of them made it past the first floor. Once I've confirmed nothing dangerous lingers, I sigh, and a real flush of annoyance crosses my face, because I miscalculated. If I'd known the game out here came at me this aggressively, I'd have spent last night turning that ring of wooden spikes into a proper killing trap instead of a deterrent, and a ready-made breakfast just walked off on a lame leg for nothing. What a waste. On the Korean feed, the viewers who got up early to gush about my divine calculations choke as one, the room flipping to the realization that the thing came up here to eat me, and that baiting was the core all along, the consensus landing on the line that high-end hunters tend to show up wearing the skin of prey. Then, while everyone's still laughing, the announcement of the National Destiny Challenge rings through every ear, the previous day's battle report. Global Challenger deaths total 713, Korea lost 5, America 4, Russia 4, Japan 6, India 9, the list rolling on. Of the causes, environmental factors like poisoning, hypothermia and falls account for 15%, conflict between challengers 6%, and beast attacks the remaining 79%. The cold figures hang in the air, those 700-odd lives simply gone into last night's dark. In the command center, the hall goes heavy again. Of the 7 pinned feeds, 4 have already gone black, and of the 3 left, 2 are covered in wounds, their eyes carrying the terror and the numbness of men who barely walked out of a disaster. And beyond those 7, one of the first batch survivors who'd lasted this long died yesterday exploring a level 3 island. Director Wee Cheljin slams his fist onto the console, his chest heaving, then drags in a long breath and forces down the pain in his eyes, ordering that the pension work for the 5 fallen compatriots begin at once. Then he gives a second order that lands harder, telling them to send the survival assessment team to evaluate the personal condition and surroundings of every Korean challenger still alive. Jo Gyeonpyeong feels it jolt through him and steps forward to ask Lo whether they're really about to use that. Why Cheljin nods. By the rules of the challenge, each country gets 1 chance per round to airdrop non-military supplies and a 20-character message to a single one of its challengers. And it isn't just a supply drop, it's a precious off-field trump card. Spent on the wrong person, it's all lost. So when to use it, on whom, with what, and how to phrase 20 characters, all weigh on the whole picture. The foreign feeds are already drowning in their own grief, from an American asking how their elite soldiers could be chewed to death, to a South Korean wailing that their Oppa's face got torn apart. Last night swallowed a great many ill-prepared elites from every country, more than a few self-declared aces among them. Throats opened by fierce beasts while they slept. At the Korean commentary desk, the 3 of them rise together. 5 compatriots have stayed in that sea of clouds forever. Sir Chunggran says, hands folded, her voice gone a little rough, that they fought for the country's tomorrow, and their names will be carved on its monument. Jin Gukbong presses his lips tight, his back straight as a drawn blade, and Seo Myungwon lowers his head and quietly wipes the corners of his eyes. On my level 2 island, I settle my face and let the number land just once. The second day, and 5 more compatriots are gone. My smooth run these 2 days has been the eye of destiny and my sneaking instincts and nothing else. But this is the Void Sea, the endgame simulation under the Supreme Will, and there's no mercy here and no faith in tears. I drag in a breath and press the grief down, because sadness can't save the country, and the only thing I can do to stretch its life is haul back more supplies and thicken the foundation under its destiny. Time to work. I cinch the backpack straps and pull up the status screen as I set out, and it reads my name, my vital signs impaired, my spirit grid at a full 100%, and my pollution at 0. My stepping foot hangs in the air, pollution back to 0. I remember it plainly, scraping my knee yesterday and seeing the fine gray specks clinging to the edge of the wound, the screen ticking over to 0.02% right then, and now after one night it's simply gone. I bend, roll up the right pant leg, peel away the cloth strip I tied as a bandage, and the sight stops me cold. No scab, no break in the skin, no inflammation, the knee smooth as new, not even a scar to find. The wound is gone. My mind tears off running. I rub my fingers hard across the spot where the gash was, and there's no pain and no ridge of scar tissue under them. A passive healing skill riding along with the Eye of Destiny maybe, and the thought's barely up before I knock it flat. Because using the eye always burns energy, and yesterday past the tiny blink framing my left eye never sent me 1 extra sting, and mental drain always leaves real exhaustion behind, so it wasn't the eye. My face goes grim, because if the eye didn't do it, then it's this body's own doing, and I saw those gray patches locked onto the wound with my own left eye. No way they evaporated into nothing. Which leaves one truth standing. My body absorbed that pollution and made it part of itself. A chill walks straight down my spine. Am I about to sprout into some tentacled monster? I hop in place a couple of times to test it, and there's no pain, no itch, joints loose, muscles pulling clean, nothing wrong anywhere. which is exactly why I woke with no fatigue and that bottomless feeling of energy, my head sharp on top of it, like I'm flooded with adrenaline that won't drain. On the Korean feed, they were all puzzling over why I'd frozen mid-step, and then the room floods with question marks. Where's the wound? Somebody types. That huge bloody gash. And another marvels that there isn't even a scar left overnight, the consensus swinging toward calling me a domestically produced cyborg, until one cooler head tells them to stop cheering and switch feeds, because Soldier King Seo Haebong's injuries healed fast too. That last line cools the brief frenzy by a few degrees. In the third research group, Yuk Jin sits under heavy dark circles with the exact frame of me checking my knee paused on his screen. A 5-meter display to his left is carved into more than 100 windows replaying Challenger footage from every country at speed. His notebook a mess of scrawl with 2 words ringed in red. Pollution and spirit grid. Blue Star can pry almost nothing out of the endgame simulation, only what the challengers let slip about a status screen in their vision. So he spent the whole night pulling hundreds of recordings and stitched these 2 concepts together from the fragments. Spirit grid stays a mystery, but pollution, read plainly, is some undesirable state that Challenge has bothered to quantify, and in the Void Sea, eating, drinking, even a simple scrape all push the value up. What it actually is, he can't say, with no sample to dissect, and the materials the critical hits return to the nation test back clean. Different species from anything on Blue Star but carrying no negative attributes at all, as though purified. He enlarges my feed and slows it, because I just muttered something my live audio caught only as a few blurred syllables. But he doesn't need the sound. He can read lips, and he mouths the 4 words in sync with mine. Pollution. Zeroed. He drags up yesterday's footage of me checking the knee right after climbing onto the level 2 island, and another loop snaps shut. My left eye can see the pollution. Only that explains the obsessive footwork and the pickiness. Because I was never choosing on blind luck, I was screening for sources of pollution. And what I just said hands him something sharper, that the pollution gets absorbed and assimilated by the body, not piled up in a dead end. Utterly fascinating, he breathes, his hunger to know whether my left eye is a mutation born of the Void Sea, or some miraculous gift from Blue Star sharper still. He pulls off his glasses, rubs his dry eyes, and lets the thought surface that he'd give a great deal to have me dig the eye out for a proper dissection. In the jungle, I move careful and slow, and I'm not glad the value dropped to 0. On the opposite, the wariness in my bones cranked to its ceiling. Every gift fate hands you has its price marked in advance, and a physical healing that breaks all human logic has to be hiding some lethal mechanism behind it, so that past a certain threshold what's waiting might be a genetic collapse, or a one-way trip into something inhuman. Stay calm. Survival first. Do not get reckless. I follow yesterday's route back toward the stream, the morning forest under a thin skin of mist. My advance still that maddening, flawless, bizarre footwork. Walk a stretch, stop, cut a hard turn, swing wide for no reason a watcher can name. Yesterday, the Korean feed would have cursed itself hoarse at this gait. Today, watching the same psychotic sense of direction, a strange comfort rises in them instead, the room agreeing that this is their brother I, and that seeing me this paranoid finally settles their nerves. Somebody else reports that a challenger from the country next door just stepped on a pile of leaves and dropped into a snake pit, gone in a blink. I weave on through the dense trees, because this trip isn't only about a few fish to fill my stomach. It's to verify something. I keep up the sneaking zigzag the whole way and reach the stream, go straight upstream to the rocky source crevice I found yesterday, pull the small folding iron pot and fill it. Then I work back down the creek hunting today's food, the eye of destiny narrowed and live, and I lock fast onto a clean silver shuttlefish, raise my right arm, fire, and drag the forearm-length thing onto the bank. I run it back twice more, and inside 5 minutes 3 silver shuttlefish of a size are flopped on the grass, and I crouch with the dagger and scale them, gut them, rinse them clean, and lay the 3 on a nearby rock. But I don't pack up. I go back to the water and trigger the eye again, sweeping the stream, and a dozen seconds and a silver shuttlefish caked in dense gray spots swims into view. No hesitation, I raise my arm, hook it, haul it, thrashing onto the bank where it slaps mud and water everywhere, and I crouch and pin it with my right hand. The second I touch it, my eyebrow goes up, because there's real power in this one, easily a third more strength than the 3 clean fish had. I bring a rock down on its head, and it twitches twice and stills, but I don't reach for the knife yet. I spread my right palm and read it with the eye, finding a few tiny gray flecks rubbed off onto the skin. Then pull up the status screen, and the pollution still reads 0, unchanged. So the stuff is only clinging to the surface for now, and hasn't seeped into my blood, and reassured by that I clean the polluted fish too and carry it to the rock, setting it side by side with one of the clean ones. This is the experiment. I lay both hands on the 2 fish at once, pressing the bellies and the spines, kneading hard and repeatedly, and the feedback through my fingers comes back completely different. The gray-spotted flesh exceptionally firm, springy, tough as rubber against the clean fish's give. Next, I work the dagger tip in and pry a slip of bone from each, hold one end in each hand and snap them. The clean bone breaks clean and easy. The gray-spotted bone makes me crank real force through my wrist before it barely gives. Firmer flesh, harder bone, more strength. The experiment closes, and my guess is confirmed that these gray spots, this high-dimensional energy, genuinely strengthen the physical structure of a living thing. No wonder the knee I scraped last night came out the morning without a mark. On the Korean feed, millions are stumped by the string of nonsense I'm performing. Somebody asking what kind of hobby is playing with dead fish now. Somebody else joking that with that kneading technique I'd be a top-tier hand at a spa. The room settling on calling it metaphysical grocery shopping. At the commentary desk, a thin sweat breaks on Seo Myung-won's forehead as he gropes for an explanation, floating that I might be gauging meat quality differences through pressure to reverse engineer the safety of the water. He grabs the thermos for a tactical sip and declares it a rigorous field food safety inspection in a tone with no conviction in it whatsoever. Jin Gukbong turns his head, the look on his face plainly asking whether Seo takes him for an idiot, and so Chonggran can only paste on a professional smile and paper over the awkwardness. In the third research group, Yukjin slams a hand to the table and shoots to his feet, snorting that mediocre fools will never understand me, his blood up. I found the anomaly of that world, he says, and this is a controlled variable experiment under the most minimalist conditions, and he snatches his pen and writes like a man possessed. The fourth fish was the control, the polluted sample I measured against the clean ones, proving the pollution of the void sea can mutate a body's structure and function, or even enhance it outright. He pushes up his glasses with fanatic awe behind the lenses, because this young man has not only the eye to find anomalies but the cold mind to peel them apart to the core. Down by the stream, with part of the pollution riddle solved, my fear of the unknown drops hard. If it brings strength, it has value, and the price of that enhancement is simply the next thing to dig into. I step to a nearby tree, snap off a sturdy branch, scrape the thorns, and skewer the 3 clean, guaranteed fish one by one. The gray-spotted one I leave exactly where it lies, because now that I've got real food in hand, who would be bored enough to eat that thing? I shoulder the catch, take up the iron pot in my left hand, find my bearing, and start back along the old path toward the treetop apartment. As the morning mist thins, the jungle opens up, and I can see further, and I wander on until I'm maybe 100 meters from camp, and my feet stop. At the edge of my left eye's field, a pale red halo blooms. Something's up. I hold my breath, and listening close, I catch it, an extremely faint wet chewing drifting over. Something's eating. I flash sideways behind a big tree, crouch low, set the fish in the iron pot down without a whisper of sound, then flatten myself to the dirt and crawl forward on all fours like a gecko. 2 meters to a dense bush, where I pinch the edge of a leaf and ease open a gap. On the Korean feed, the comments flood at the sight of those movements, smooth right down to the bone, calling it the ancestral craft kicking in again and naming me the day's ground-hugging demon. Half the room bets it's last night's big leopard, the rest steadying themselves on the line that as long as the enemy doesn't move, I can camp till the end of time. I hold my breath and focus, my gaze cutting through the gap in the leaves. In a clearing a dozen meters off, a wide pool of dark red blood soaks the soil, and at the center of it lies the carcass of a leopard-like beast, a full size larger than a calf. Beside the body, crouched and hunched over its belly, a creature about the size of a dog feasts to its heart's content, and every time it lifts its head, broken flesh hangs swinging from its fangs. A light frame opens in the corner of my right eye, naming the leopard-like carcass as a black-spined leopard, and the dog-sized feeder beside it as an iron-jaw beast. My gaze drops to the leopard's foreleg, where an unusually deep slash runs clean and straight. No ragged tear a bite would leave, the edges parted by something sharp. The fur color matches the tuft I pried off my thorn spikes this morning to the strand, and the truth lands all at once, because this sorry dead thing is the very leopard that tried to clear my wall last night and failed. I stare at the minced flesh strewn across the dirt, and a real pang goes through me, since whatever else this is, that was supposed to be my breakfast. Half a world away, the Korean feed, which had been holding its breath for me, goes slack with disbelief that I'm grieving a meal at a moment like this. The room cracks up that Brother Eye's priorities are a thing to behold, even as the overseas handles swarm in like flies on rot to jeer that the Korean coward is too scared to twitch, and only waiting to die. At the commentary desk, Seo Myung-won mops sweat and warns that I'm in real danger. The iron rule of the wild is to never disturb a beast at its meal, since its sense of territory and its instinct to guard food both peak right then, and any noise reads as a challenge. My only sane move, he says, is to ride the favorable wind and crawl back the way I came without trying to play hero. I narrow my left eye in the brush and trigger the Eye of Destiny. The iron-jaw beast lights up under a pale red halo with only sparse gray flecks clinging to it, which makes it a fairly clean, decent quality resource. I lick my dry lips, my mind already moving, because it stole my breakfast and it can pay the debt with itself. I sweep the surrounding trees and thorn thickets in a couple of seconds, and a whole sequence of old practiced moves snaps together in my head. Holding my breath, I work backward to the big tree, lift the 3 silver shuttlefish off the branch, and pick the fattest one. A few slashes across its back and belly, a hard squeeze, and blood wells out along the grain of the meat. I pull the 10-meter grappling hook off the side of my pack, fix the bleeding fish onto the iron tip, and stand carefully with the rope's end in hand, swing it twice, and let it fly. The hook whistles over the iron jaw beast and drops into a thorn thicket a dozen meters behind it, the fish thudding into the leaves with the blood smell rolling out at once. The beast shudders, lifts its head, growls low in its throat, and abandons the leopard carcass to nose toward the thicket on its rear right. The second its back is to me, I move. I aim the wind-chasing claw at a horizontal branch 7 or 8 meters overhead, and hit the switch, the 3-clawed hook punching into the bark, the cable retracting fast, and my feet leave the ground as I swing up to land square on the thick limb without a wasted step. Below me, the beast has just reached the thicket's edge, head down, sniffing the bloody bait. From the high vantage, I aim my right arm and fire, and the hook drops out of the sky onto its back, 3 claws snapping shut and locking tight. It screams. The pain sends it thrashing wild, trying to throw off the thing on its spine, and I slap the switch on my wrist hard with my left hand. The cable draws taut and yanks it back a few steps, but it's quick, digging all 4 claws into the mud, dropping its weight, shoving backward to resist, and the branch under me creaks as the beast hauls me forward. Stubborn, are we? A cold edge comes into my face. I kick off with my right leg and leap clear off the branch, and the rough trunk becomes a fixed pulley. My falling weight, multiplied by the acceleration of the drop, converts into a brutal counterweight on the far end of the line, the pulley and the lever working at once, the cable grinding against the bark as wood chips spray. The iron jaw beast, claws still buried, feels an irresistible pull tear up out of its back and rip its whole body off the ground, and the balance of the trade flips. I land on my feet with my knees bent to soak the impact, and overhead the beast hangs suspended under the tree, 4 limbs kicking at nothing, whimpering in its throat. All that brute strength and nowhere to put it. A dead end. The Korean feed goes quiet for a breath, then detonates over the textbook pulley tactic, the room crowning me a genius of compulsory education physics, while the foreign handles that were crowing a moment ago all fall silent. At the desk, Seo Myung-won's jaw drops, the thermos he was about to set down frozen in the air. Jin Goopbong slaps the table with a laugh loud enough to rattle it, booming that nobody told me a man has to retreat from a beast. Then I'm teaching the whole watching world today what it means to be crushed by sheer intelligence. So Cheongran tucks the loose hair at her temple and says with a soft smile that Korean wisdom may simply exceed the cognitive ceiling of certain countries' viewers, that people raised to think with brawn might struggle to grasp how knowledge rewrites fate, and the gentle blade lands so clean the overseas trolls nearly cough up blood. I brush the wood chips off my hands and pick up the thick branch I'd used to skewer the fish. Easing the cable down with the wind-chasing claw, I bring the dangling beast to a stop level with my eyes, where it's still squirming and snarling, and I swing the club at its head. I tell it to bare its fangs again. I tell it to keep eating my breakfast. I tell it to dine and dash on my head one more time, and each line lands with another solid crack of wood on skull. The Korean room loses the plot entirely, half of them dying laughing that this stopped being a life or death fight and turned into a domestic dispute, the other half admitting that when it comes to holding a grudge over a stolen meal, I have no equal. After a dozen good strikes, I shake out my aching wrist, stab the branch upright in the mud, and pull my dagger backhand to step in and finish it. But the moment I take half a step, the beast twists on the swing of the cable and lunges, its front claws grazing the back of my hand, and only because I jerk back fast do I keep my skin, hanging from a tree and still this feral. I drop the idea of close work entirely. I press my raised right arm down, plant my right foot on the cable to pin it, and free both hands, then haul the thick branch back out of the ground and let the dagger fly up and down its shavings rustling to the dirt, until a crude wooden spear with one sharpened end comes off the line. Long reach against short reach, I think, so figure your way out of that one. I grip the spear in both hands and drive it at the suspended beast, but its survival instinct is wide open and it wrenches itself aside in the air. So I land only a few gashes across its hind legs and ribs, while it dodges every vital point and roars all the more savagely. My temper goes up to meet it. I turn the thrust into a slash, wind my arm around, and bring the spear down hard on its spine, and the blow lands solid, its whole body convulsing and seizing up stiff. There, a glint cuts across my eye. I drive force up from my waist and gut and thrust the spear straight up with everything I have, the dull sound of the point sinking into flesh ringing out. Then my expression freezes, because the beast happened to spin right at that instant, and my spear went, without the slightest deviation, into the most delicate and unspeakable part of its hindquarters, and clean through in one stroke. A scream splits the jungle and rakes the clouds, carrying a despair and an agony past any words, the kind that prickles the scalp and runs cold straight down. It jerks violently in the air, eyes nearly bulging out, and a few seconds later the eyes roll white, the head drops slack, and it dies on the spot. In great pain, and it has to be said, in utter humiliation. I'm left holding the spear upright in both hands, numb all over, looking from my own hands to the motionless thing hanging above me, and I swear, quietly, that I really did not mean for it to go that way. The Korean feed sits silent for 5 full seconds, then erupts like a volcano over the soul-piercing strike, the room insisting they can feel that heart-wrenching agony through the screen, naming me a max-level troll who specializes in things no human being would do. Right on schedule, the overseas handles arrive waving the banner of animal rights. The United States branding me a perverted Korean with no bottom line. France protesting a desecration of life. South Korea demanding the Supreme will punish a twisted Korean mind. Canada insisting a beast's life is a life. And Korea owes an apology. Jin Gukbom laughs himself furious and grabs the microphone to open fire, but the Korean viewers have already beaten him to it, keyboards throwing sparks. They snap that nobody lectures anybody about humanitarianism in a national destiny challenge, that double-standard hypocrites who do worse have no standing to call a kill ugly, that Korea worships no sanctimony and believes only in surviving. So Chonggran leans to the mic at the perfect beat and offers her sincere advice to any viewer who finds it pitiable, that when their own challenger meets a fierce beast, they're welcome to lie down on the spot and feed themselves to it, the better to display their earth-moving international compassion. None of the clamor reaches me. Holding to the survival creed that a finishing blow is the first of all virtues, I drive the dagger once more into its throat and watch the blood thread down the fur until I'm sure it's gone. Then I carve it up fast, taking only the succulent tenderloin and the two muscular hind legs, wiping the blade clean on its hide and sheathing it. I retract the wind-chasing claw and let the carcass thud into the grass, wrap the meat and the silver shuttlefish in a few broad leaves, take up the little iron pot and walk off without a backward glance. The Korean room is baffled that I'd leave that much meat behind. Somebody scolding that I've gotten cocky. Somebody else insisting I should at least hang it to air dry. Seo Myungwon finds his footing at last and explains with open admiration that processing a beast that size without proper tools is a brutal drain on time and energy. That wild animals crawl with parasites. The tenderloin and hind legs I took are the firmest muscle, the cleanest, the safest, so leaving the rest is the only rational cost-benefit call out here. The viewers come around deciding they'd wrong me again. I'm already back at the camp under the giant tree, the package down when my stomach growls in perfect time, a full morning of hard work burned clean out of me. I narrow my left eye and sweep the area, and finding no red halo closing in, I coax last night's fire back to life, skewer a silver shuttlefish on a branch, and set it roasting, the oil dripping and the char smell spreading. When it's done, I tear into it with big bites, never minding the heat, the savory flesh turning into a warm current down into my stomach that puts the worst of the hunger to rest. And once the one fish is gone, I sit cross-legged by the fire and study the pieces of iron-jaw beast I hauled back. I pull the dagger backhand and test the edge against my thumb, ready to process all of it. I don't reach for the knife yet. I dust off my backside, get up, and dive into the brush, making several trips back, hauling not just a pile of broad leaves but a mix of dry and damp branches, and finally a fairly flat stone slab. The Korean feed watches me bustle and decides I'm only fiddling with junk because I'm full, one of them asking whether I'm about to break a boulder on my chest, another griping that the wet branches won't even burn. I sit before the tree hollow, tip a little water out of the iron pot, scrub the slab's surface with my palm, and rinse a few large leaves, miserly with every drop. After whittling a handful of thin wooden skewers, I fold a leaf's edges up into a square little bowl and pin the corners with the skewers, and a leak-proof leaf bowl takes shape in no time. I pour about a third of the pot's water into it and set it back in the hollow as reserve drinking water. With that settled, I drag the slab in front of me as a cutting board and move the meat onto it. The first thing off is a thick, juicy slab of tenderloin, which I set aside on a clean leaf as today's lunch, smacking my lips. The rest I work with real patience, the dagger gliding along the edges to trim away the white fascia, because in a place like this I don't want to be picking my teeth with twigs, and then I cut everything that remains into strips a finger thick and 2 fingers wide. The Korean room finally catches on when I rig a simple branch frame by the fire, set the iron pot on it, and dump all the raw strips in to boil. The room announces that the pot is finally earning its keep, jokes that boiled meat with no chili or peppercorns deserves 0 stars, reminds each other that the man next door in India can't even gnaw bark. Seo Myungwon straightens up into his own element and declares the move wise, that wild meat carries parasites and unknown bacteria, that roasting over open flame can't guarantee the inside cooks through, and that boiling at high heat is the safest way to kill what's hiding, that I'm securing my food. In Korea, in H City, the television in my home carries the footage of me boiling the meat. On the sofa, Lee Mi sees that her son is not only alive and well, but has stockpiled a heap of meat, and the stone that's been crushing her chest finally drops, the boy turning out a decent cook who even knows about killing germs, which means he won't starve in that godforsaken place after all. Her eyes go a little red, but a smile of relief rests on her lips, because as long as he eats, stays warm, and is out of danger, nothing matters more. The doorbell rings. Lee Mi wipes her eyes and opens the door on the same pair of operational agents who delivered supplies before. The man apologizes gently for the intrusion, and she hurries them in, but the woman waves it off, saying they won't sit, that they've only come with good news. The general administration, mindful that Im Yop is fighting for the country and worried about her living alone in H City, has spoken with the Western Military Region, where her husband is posted. The commanders there have approved letting her move into the unit's family housing compound, so the two of them can be near each other and look out for one another day to day. Tears well up at that, and she covers her mouth and chokes out her thanks, that the country still thinks of them like this, and the woman tells her it's only right, that the car is already downstairs and offers to help her pack today, though Lee insists she can manage it herself. My work hasn't stopped at all. The boiled meat is still rolling in the pot when I light a second fire nearby, cross and stack a few forked branches, and lash them tight with thin vines into a simple wooden rack a few dozen centimeters off the ground. I scrape a heap of damp branches frantically with the dagger until I've got a pile of moist shavings and twigs set aside. 20 minutes on, the pot is boiling hard, a layer of fat and grayish foam riding the surface. The strip's gone fully white and shrunken, and I fish one out, blow on it, tear off a piece and chew, finding the texture just right before I lift the pot off the heat. Then I smother the whole pile of damp shavings and green branches onto the second fire, and the flame chokes down without burning clean, a great cloud of acrid white smoke climbing into the air. I squint and cough through it, because that bitter reek is exactly the smoke I wanted, and I shift the rack over the thick plume and lay the cooked strips across it. The low fire underneath releases its slow heat, and the smoke wraps the meat tight, the boiling having killed the parasites and bacteria, the smoking now drawing out the moisture to preserve it. The Korean feed sits stunned, then gets it all at once, scolding themselves for thinking this was ever just boiled meat. Working out that boiling sterilizes and smoking dehydrates, and the shelf life is maxed clean out, hollering for Seo Myung-won to pick up his thermos. At the desk, Jin Gukbong slaps his thigh and roars that old Seo misjudged again, that I wasn't cooking lunch, I was building a strategic reserve, and Seo Myung-won's old face flushes so red he could almost dig a 3-room apartment with his toes, taking a quiet tactical sip and conceding that this kid's thinking runs past common sense. So Chonggran covers a laugh and tells him not to mind it, that I always seem to bring them something they didn't see coming. I pick up the iron pot and dump the spent water far off, because the broth from boiling raw meat is nothing but blood foam and parasite remains, and keeping it only invites trouble. After rinsing the pot, I turn to the leftover branches and pull out a thick one I'd set aside on purpose while gathering wood, over 2 meters long, dead straight, hard and heavy, the weight of it excellent in my hand. I draw the dagger, press the blade to the bark, and scrape away the rough outer skin and the burrs inch by inch. The wind-chasing claw is good, but in the end, it's only auxiliary gear. And in a void sea this dangerous, I don't have the cultivation to take on 3,000 emperors bare-handed, which means I need a long, thick weapon that can deliver a piercing blow the instant I want one. I sit cross-legged under the giant tree, the 2-meter hardwood in my left hand, and the dagger gripped in my right. Shaving along the grain, the chips falling in a steady rustle as the bark comes clear. Every half hour I stop, walk to the rack, and brave the stinging smoke to turn the strips one by one, the slow, low fire and the thick smoke pulling their surface to an enticing reddish brown. After more than an hour, the spear tip is carved down to a sharp cone, and I bring it close to the base of the fire, using the heat of the coals to fire harden it, drawing it back only once the surface is charred black. I stand, grip it at the middle, test the weight, and with a flick of the wrist and power from my core, I drive 3 quick thrusts into the air, the dull, crisp whoosh of each one leaving me satisfied. An inch longer is an inch stronger, I tell myself, and the next thing that dares bare its teeth at me, I'll run straight through. As noon comes on, my stomach starts to growl. I feed the fire until the flames leap, skewer the last clean silver shuttlefish, and stand it slanted in the ground beside the heat to roast, then pour the bowl of reserved water into the iron pot and drop in all the tenderloin slices I'd cut off that morning. Oil hisses into the fire, the char smell drifts everywhere, and the water bubbles up with the meat tumbling inside. When the fish is golden on both sides, I reach over and take a bite straight off it, the skin crisp, and the flesh tender. Chewing hard, I lift a piece of cooked tenderloin from the pot on a skewer, blow on it twice and toss it in my mouth where it comes back soft and springy and flooded with savory juice. If only I had a little minced garlic, it would be perfect. I lean against the giant tree and let out a long breath. The Korean room comes apart watching me feast, the prepackaged meal in someone's hand suddenly tasting like nothing, somebody's tears running from the corners of their mouth. The consensus that even with no seasoning, this beats the yellowish paste the man next door in India is choking down. The room renaming the survival show a full-blown mukbang. Full and content, I pat my belly, let out a burp, and turn to the rack on the other side. By my count, it's been smoking a solid 5 or 6 hours since morning, the surface moisture drawn out, the strips shrunken, the color gone to that tempting light reddish brown. About done, I decide. Time to wrap up. I scrape every smoked strip off and lay them on a clean slab to cool, then take the leaves I'd washed earlier and bind the meat tight in groups of 10, pinning the openings with small wooden skewers. It takes the better part of an hour to finish 7 bundles of portable smoked jerky, and I stuff them all into the very bottom of my backpack, the solid new weight giving me a deep sense of security. Now I need to gather some other supplies to hit tonight's upload quota. I pick up the iron pot, douse the fire with the last water at the bottom, then stomp the ashes down with my foot to be sure no spark survives. I take up my new wooden spear and set out to explore. I've barely cleared 2 steps from camp when a drop of water splashes the back of my hand. I stop and look up. At some point, the sky has filled with massive dark clouds pressing low over the floating island, and I narrow my left eye and trigger the Eye of Destiny, and my whole field of vision floods solid red. A natural disaster. I close the eye after a single second, and even so it stings sharp. The range of this thing apparently swallowing the entire level 2 island. A torrential downpour crashes down from above, so violent it drowns the whole jungle in a white sheet of water in the space of a blink. This rotten sky doesn't play fair. I curse under my breath and wheel back into the hollow at the foot of the giant tree in a few steps, rainwater streaming down my cheeks, and I look up at my apartment 20 meters in the air, where in a storm like this the water pooling in that natural hollow could probably raise fish. My carefully built safe point is scrapped on the spot, and all I can do is huddle in the trunk's hollow and ride out the wind and rain. The Korean feed's joking chatter vanishes in an instant, every heart in their throat. The room reels that the rain came with no prelude at all, that my high-altitude flat is about to become a swimming pool, that the shelter up top is finished and the only question now is whether I can hold below, somebody asking whether fierce beasts come out in weather like this. Seo Myung-won's expression goes grim as he calls it big trouble, warning that in the wild, a rainstorm like this is more lethal than any beast because it strips a challenger's body heat fast, that the shelter edge I'd piled up has been reset to 0 by the disaster. Jin Gukbong clenches his fists and stares at the screen without a word, while the overseas handles seize their long-awaited carnival, the United States crowing that retribution has come, and the Korean luck has run dry, India starting a countdown that the Korean rat won't last 3 hours. I crouch in the hollow and pull my collar tight as the temperature plunges under the lash of the rain. I thought it was a passing shower that would quit soon, but it only thickens, heavier and heavier, and when my gaze cuts through the curtain I see the puddles at the base of the tree already merging into one, the water climbing fast, the turbid muck already over the surface of the roots, and creeping toward the hollow. At this rate the hollow goes under in less than half an hour. I grit my teeth, done playing the sitting duck, because better to gamble while the sky isn't fully dark than to wait here and drown. Higher ground is my only way out, and once night falls, blind in the black with hypothermia setting in, I'm truly finished. I wipe the mud water off my face, swing the backpack on, drag the 2 straps tight and buckle them across my chest, and grip the wooden spear in my left hand. My gaze pierces the rain toward the faint outline of the hills at the island's center. Facing the gale, I step out of the hollow and plunge headlong into the white curtain. I've run only a dozen meters and I'm already soaked to the bone. I make straight for a stand of broadleaf plants like banana trees ahead, where I'd cut leaves before, and slice off a single broadleaf over 2 meters long, holding it directly over my head. The downpour drums on it as I trudge through the mud with the spear in my other hand, stepping uneven toward the higher ground of the hills. The Korean room floods with worry, asking why I'd leave a hollow that at least blocked the rain, fretting that the storm is freezing just to watch, that running into a beast out here in this wind would be too reckless, that I just had a full meal and I'm already fleeing for my life again. The overseas viewers pounce, the United States jeering that running out at a time like this is begging to die, India asking whether nature is finally about to deal with the rat. At the desk, Jin Gukbong slaps the table and praises the decisiveness, pointing at the speed of the rising water, that my hollow is a half-sunk groove and another half hour in it would have me learning to swim like a turtle. Seo Myung-won wipes the cold sweat from his brow and agrees that jungle storms flood easy, that hypothermia is terrible but drowning is worse, so moving to high ground is the only road that survives. The flooding on my island has turned vicious. I slog through mud with the muck swallowing my calves, my stamina draining fast, my sight choked by the rain curtain so I can't see past 10 meters. I blink the left eye and trigger the eye, and a patch of red halo darts frantically 100-some meters off my front left. A beast flushed from its lair by the flood and crazed by the rain, so I change course at once and swing wide around it. Enduring the slight sting in my eye, I lean on the precognition to skirt several more beasts in a row, but when I finally push through a dense stand of trees, my path is cut off hard. The rain has converged into a fast 10-meter torrent carved through the low ground, churning with broken branches and thorns and half logs, the water savage. Through the rain, I pick out a lone raised mound on the far bank, the only high ground anywhere near.